subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Kyle waved to Shot Anna, who was standing there, frowned slightly, and said, "I feel a little dizzy. Do you know how to massage my head and shoulders? Please give me a little massage." "Ah." Satana hesitated for a moment, then nodded like a chicken, walked around the desk in small steps, and walked behind Kyle's chair. She didn't notice that when she passed by the chair, a hint of coldness appeared in Kyle's slightly open blue eyes. The best opportunity for assassination has been set. From now on, Shatana's life and death are entirely in her own hands. No matter whether the other party will become a hero in the future, as long as there is the slightest signal of launching an assassination attack, Kyle will kill her here without hesitation. This is Kyle's bottom line. If you become his enemy, you will just lie on the ground and become a corpse. General, you can close your eyes for a while. The massage will be much more comfortable." Satana whispered, and her small hands slowly reached out to the back of Kyle's head. "Okay, try harder." Kyle nodded in response, closing his eyes and concentrating his mind. The other party was not carrying any weapons, and his muscle strength alone was not enough to break his neck. However, just in case, he had already put his venom suit into a defensive state ready for battle. Soon, Satana's 10 slender fingers landed on the back of Kyle's head and pressed it with a little force, kneading it down to the neck and shoulders, and then up to the forehead. Kyle, whose body was a little tense and stiff, suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. What's this unexpected comfort? I have to say that Shatana's massage technique is very skilled and proficient. This should be one of the majors learned in the agent training disguise. In addition, the girl's fingers are slender and powerful. Wait, that doesn't seem to be the point. Aren't you going to take action? Kyle was confused. At this critical moment when the war was imminent, the Soviet Red Room organization sent a super agent to lurk here. If it was not for him, then what was it for? The target person is not him? Or the purpose of the mission is not to assassinate him? It is true that although the Soviet Union likes to stir up trouble, it would not send agents to assassinate a newly promoted major general who was a hero of the United States during the Triple Alliance. Under Kyle's doubts, Satana massaged and kneaded for 10 minutes before stopping, panting slightly and waving her sore fingers. The man's bones and muscles are much denser and tougher than expected. It is just as the organization said in the mission, super soldier ability. Shot Anna made up her mind and asked softly behind Kyle's ear, "General Kyle, how do you feel? Are you still dizzy?" Kyle tilted his head back slightly, closed his eyes, and said in enjoyment, "It's much better." "That's good, but a large-scale war is about to begin, so it's best to investigate any symptoms in advance." Shot Anna paused here and gave professional advice. "To be on the safe side, General, you'd better PK a drop of blood on your finger, and let me take it back to the medical room for testing. I can check the detailed condition of your body now." "Oh, blood test." Kyle opened his eyes completely at this time, revealing a subtle expression. Agent mission, but he didn't expect it was just to get a little bit of his blood. With the venom suit, even if he suffered skin injuries, he would not leave his blood on the battlefield. A drop of blood may seem insignificant, but this is the Marvel world of high technology and biology after all. Who knows what those crazy Soviet scientists are planning when they take this drop of blood back? Don't wait until the time comes to create an artificial human for him. Now that he knew the purpose, Kyle didn't need to play along anymore. He turned cold and said, "Is this your purpose?" "What purpose?" Shot Hannah, who was still sitting behind the office chair, was stunned. She managed to remain calm and said softly, "General Kyle, what are you talking about? This is just a simple blood test." Kyle threw out a sentence that broke her last hope of defense. "Do you still want to keep pretending?" Agent of the Soviet Red Room. Before he finished listening, Shatana's face changed, and she suddenly slashed at the back of Kyle's neck with both hands, trying to knock him out. "Let me play with you." Kyle snorted coldly. His reaction was even faster. He raised his hands and reached back to hold the girl's hands. Satana tried hard to pull her hands away, but found that Kyle's hands were like steel clamps, and she couldn't move even a finger. Just as she was about to kick, a crushing force came from her arms, And then her whole body was lifted up and flipped 180 degrees over Kyle's head and slammed hard on the hardwood desk. Pa! The desk collapsed and split in two, and Shatana groaned in pain and fell on the scattered wooden fragments and document papers. Ahem! Shatana had just coughed and struggled to get up. With a slightly horrified look in her eyes, she saw the handsome young man throw aside the general's coat he was wearing, revealing the Venom battle suit that combined coldness and murderousness. Very good. Just stand up like this. Let me see your strength as a Soviet super agent. Kyle looked at her indifferently, his muscles clearly standing out in the black combat suit, and his murderous aura enveloped the entire office like a substance. He rubbed his fist, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and said coldly, I hope you can let me warm up a little before the war comes. Chapter 61. Capturing a Soviet agent in the battleship's internal corridor, Fury, dressed in a lieutenant officer's formal attire, trotted hurriedly towards Kyle's office. The female military doctor, who was suspected to be an agent from another country, had been in the office for some time, and he also wanted to see how the matter was handled afterwards. As soon as he arrived outside the closed iron door of the office, Fury vaguely heard the conversation between Kyle and the young military doctor inside the room. Can you come over? I'm not coming. Then I'll come over. Don't come over here. The short and boring conversation ended, and then the sound of fierce fighting was heard in the office. Fury was about to get closer and knock on the door when the other side of the iron door suddenly slammed into by something, leaving a slight dent on the door made of fine iron. Kyle, are you okay? Fury decisively gave up opening the door, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and shouted loudly. Kyle's calm and steady voice soon came from inside the door. It's okay. Just stay outside the office and don't let other soldiers in. Okay. Fury nodded in response, not worrying at all about whether Kyle in the room was in danger. This is totally unnecessary. The one who should be worried is the person who is fighting Kyle. In fact, this is true. At this time, inside the battleship's office, wood chips and paper scraps were scattered all over the floor, full of traces of the devastation left after the fierce battle. Kyle, who was not equipped with any other equipment except the Venom suit, stood straight in the middle of the office, looking coldly at Shatana, who was half sitting and half lying on the iron gate in front of him. Satana is now a completely different person. Her childish face is full of indifference. Her beautiful eyes are filled with sharp coldness, and the white military doctor's dress on her body covers her petite body like a beggar's outfit, and it is extremely disheveled with sweat and dust stuck on it. It's a one-sided, crushing victory. What? Is this all the top agent trained by the Soviet Union can do? I haven't even used my full strength yet, and he's about to fall? Kyle sneered. Shatana gritted her teeth, endured the pain from her injured body, and slowly climbed up with the help of the iron gate. Not bad. Kyle showed a devilish smile. He had used 80% of his strength just now and punched and kicked the opponent several times in a row. An ordinary normal person would have been beaten to death long ago. But now Shatana still has the ability to fight. The super agent's immune system and ability to resist attacks are indeed not as simple as it sounds. I'll let you go first, Kyle said, spreading his hands. Shatana did not hesitate, knowing that she could not escape in the territory of other troops, so she could only fight to the death. She lowered her body slightly and rushed forward. When she was within 2 meters of Kyle's body, she turned her right palm and stretched out a piece of broken wood that had been hidden. The tip of the broken wood board pierced Kyle's eyes with a whistling sound. Kyle seemed to have known this for a long time. He quickly stretched out his left hand and grabbed the wrist of the right hand holding the sharp wood. He pressed down hard with his 5 fingers, and the girl's wrist was almost broken with a crackling sound. Ah, let me go! Satana screamed in pain and quickly kicked her left calf towards Kyle's lower body. The next moment, her left ankle was also caught by Kyle's other hand and held tightly in his palm. This is totally a case of countering each move. Given the huge gap between combat skills and physical fitness, Shatana is just a kitten with bared fangs to Kyle, the cheetah. Captain America Steve was completely defeated by Kyle in pure close combat. Not to mention that Satana's combat power is less than half of Steve's. If Steve is Kyle's younger brother, then Shatana is the younger sister. She doesn't even have a chance of winning. Boring. Kyle looked coldly at Shatana, who was imprisoned by him and unable to move, and shook his head in disappointment. He grabbed the other's petite body with both hands and lifted it up, bent his left leg and raised it, then slammed his knee hard into the girl's soft belly. This attack was a real full-strength knee strike. Shatana, who originally wanted to resist, rolled her eyes and sank to the ground, completely losing her combat ability. Kyle also loosened his hands, leaving her twitching and curled up on the ground. The short battle quickly came to an end. "Fury, you can come in now." Kyle dusted off his hands and called out. The iron door was quickly opened by Fury, who was acting as the doorman. He walked into the room and was shocked when he saw the messy office and Shatana curled up on the ground with wounds all over her body. The Soviet Union is really restless. They sent agents to secretly take my blood, Kyle said expressionlessly. What should we do with her then? Imprison her or hand her over to the superiors in the rear for handling? Fury asked. Let's keep the relevant matters secret for the time being and wait until this battle is over. It will not do our army any good to fall out with the Soviet Union now. After Kyle finished speaking, he put on his general's coat again, glanced at Shatana on the ground, and said, "Send her to the battleship's single room and detain her. Send a female military doctor to help treat her injuries and change her into a military combat uniform. I'll ask her something later." Later, Fury stared at Shatana, who was still twitching on the ground, in surprise. "She might not be able to recover in a few days, right?" Kyle shrugged and said, "I didn't kill her. Given her physical condition, she will probably wake up in half an hour." Fury shook his head and gave a serious evaluation afterwards. "You are the target of the mission. It's really a pity, for whoever comes, you are sending yourself to die. We haven't even discussed this matter yet. When we get a chance in the future, we must take down the Red Room organization," Kyle said coldly. "The experiment was planned to hit him. Sorry, I'll make a note of it in my death notebook." An hour later, Shatana gradually woke up in an isolated single room. As soon as she woke up, she felt a pain from the injuries she had suffered. She looked around calmly and found herself tied to a wooden chair, with her hands and feet tightly wrapped in ropes. Her tattered white dress had long been replaced with a small American green combat uniform. The strong ropes on the body are indeed a confinement for ordinary people, but for Shatana, it is just a trick to fix the body. She can easily break free with her own flexibility. But apart from the ropes on her body, Shatana could still feel a cold, round metal collar tightly clasped around her neck. "I advise you not to struggle in vain. The thing on your neck is the electric shock collar that I asked Howard to make for you. It can be used as long as you want to remove it or press the button on the remote control. The maximum electric shock is enough to make a cow of the size of file incontinence." A cold and steady voice sounded from the door, and Kyle walked slowly into the holding room while speaking. He originally prepared the electric shock collar to deal with the Winter Soldier in the future, but he didn't expect to use it here first. Success captured a Soviet agent. Chapter 62 Black Widow is not a widow after listening to Kyle's warning. Satana bit her lower lip lightly, turned her face away, and lowered her head, no longer having any thoughts of resisting. This was not because of the threat from the electric shock collar, but because of the pressure from Kyle's powerful strength. After a personal battle, Shatana, who was proficient in tactical analysis, understood very well that the young man in front of her was undoubtedly at the top of the world's combat power and was an insurmountable mountain. "I like talking to smart people." Kyle smiled faintly, closed the door, and sat on the chair on the other side of the table in front of Shatana. Shatana said in a desperate tone, "No matter how you deal with me, I won't tell you anything about the Red Room." When she talked about the Red Room, there was a hint of fear in her eyes and on her face. "That's perfect. I happen to have no interest in the Red House organization. Anyway, one day I will go there and destroy it." Kyle smiled nonchalantly, tapped his fingers on the table, and said calmly, "I am more interested in you, so I will only ask you some personal questions that are not related to the organization." While saying this, his mind was focused on the blue ability card on Shatana. Super Agent. Current status. Can be extracted, cannot be possessed simultaneously with the Super Soldier ability. It can be extracted, but it cannot be possessed at the same time. Isn't this a contradiction? The first time Kyle saw the cards on Shatana, he had such doubts in his mind. However, Shot Anna was the only person he had seen so far who held a blue ability card. Super Soldier was a special blue ability card with a rare prefix, and the blue rarity grade also had the restriction that it could only be drawn once. What happens if I draw a blue ability card that cannot be used? Kyle came here just for this experiment, and while concentrating, he drew the blue ability card of Super Agent. To extract the blue ability card, you also need to stay within a 1-meter range and read it continuously for 30 minutes. Start drawing cards, 1799, 1798. A slightly longer countdown begins. Kyle also took advantage of this time to start a conversation with Shot Anna. The Red Room organization should have already given you detailed information about me, so I won't introduce myself here. You should introduce yourself first. Shot Anna responded coldly. You also have my file information. My name is Shot Anna Caroline. I don't think a Soviet agent would use his real name to infiltrate under a disguised identity. Kyle smiled slightly. Seeing that Shot Anna was still ignoring him, he slowly took out a small remote control from the pocket of his general's coat and pondered it with his fingers. This question does not involve the Red Room organization. If you don't even cooperate with the basic questions and answers, then do you want to experience the taste of electric shock first? File size and continents, and so on are very disgusting. You devil. Satana glared at Kyle fiercely, her eyes wandering on the remote control, and quickly gritted her teeth and said, Isn't it okay for me to say it? My real name is Natasha Romanoff. Oh. What's the code name of the Red Room organization? Kyle continued to ask. Didn't you say that you wouldn't ask about the Red Room organization? I've already mentioned my real name, so why can't I reveal my code name? UBD. Natasha Romanoff thought for a long time and finally uttered an adjective that was full of disgust. She is now just a Soviet Red Room training agent who has been in training for a few years. No matter how much brainwashing and extreme training she undergoes, it cannot cover up the foundation of a 16-year-old underage girl. How can you defeat Kyle, a veteran, by simply using tricks and schemes? Natasha Romanoff pouted dejectedly. Codename, Black Widow. Widow? I didn't expect you to get married so early. You're still without a husband, which is really pitiful. Kyle teased. Natasha Romanoff shook her head in protest. A hole. The Black Widow is a venomous spider, not a widow. I know it's the Black Widow. Kyle nodded in understanding. He had guessed it before, but he didn't expect it was really her. Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, one of the veteran heroes of the future Avengers. Although her combat capability is at the bottom level, she often plays a key role in certain war situations. She can be considered a relatively well-known socialite among the heroes in the Marvel world. Her current code name is Black Widow, but in the future, she will also be a true widow who kills her husband, a black rose with thorns. Kyle thought about it and asked, Natasha Romanoff, why did you join the Red Room? Need I ask? Of course, it's to become a top-notch strong person. Natasha Romanoff snorted coldly. She lost her parents in the war when she was young and had long since abandoned the identity of a weak and powerless girl. As far as I know, in order to make agent members loyal to the organization, the Soviet Red Room will implant virtual memories into new members for brainwashing. Kyle smiled and guided. Do you often feel that your previous memories are incomplete, inconsistent, or tortuous and strange? Natasha Romanoff remained silent, not knowing what she was thinking. Think about it carefully. The Red Room will make you stronger, but it will also turn you into a killing weapon that will make you lose yourself. Kyle said, and quietly waited for the countdown to draw a card. 3, 2, 1, successful extraction. The card drawing countdown ended, and an ability card, glowing blue, appeared out of thin air in the card space. But unlike previous ability cards, this card seemed to be rejected by all ability cards and could not be amplified to the external body. The card was forced to retreat to the edge of the blank area. Kyle's mind entered the card space, and he reached out to take the blue ability card to check it. Super Agent. Current status. Cannot be possessed simultaneously with a super soldier, but can be given to others for use. Warnings given to the card. 2 identical ability cards cannot exist in the card space at the same time, except for add life. Every time you grant an ability card of blue or higher quality, you will enter a 3-day cooldown period for granting the card. Each person can only be given one ability card of blue quality or above and cannot be withdrawn. It can only be forcibly destroyed within a 3-meter range. Can it be given to other people to use? Kyle was shocked. He unexpectedly discovered the third major card function besides drawing cards and sacrificing cards. Give the card. I can't use the ability card myself, but after I draw it, I can give it to others to use. What does that mean? This means that as long as there are people like Natasha Romanoff who have original blue ability cards, giving cards ability can cultivate a group of forces with the same blue ability cards in enough time. Kyle looked at Natasha Romanoff in front of him with shining eyes and made a decision secretly in preparation for his future power. Natasha Romanoff can't submit it, but must keep it in her hands. Chapter 63. The whole army attacks if we say that reading and sacrificing cards can quickly improve personal strength and even make you stronger when facing stronger opponents. Then, the third new card drawing ability can extend this feature to a team force. In this way, after the end of World War II, the plan to cultivate family power can be further improved. When Kyle thought of this, he was so excited that he couldn't calm down for a long time. Even if there were plans to build up power before, there was only a giant ancient dragon turtle island as a territory embryo. Only by giving the ability to draw cards can it be truly regarded as the foundation and heritage of creating a family. Natasha Romanoff, who was tied up, noticed that Kyle's eyes were looking more and more strange, and she couldn't help biting her lip and turning her face away. Humph! Men are animals who think with their lower body. Even American heroes are no exception. I don't want to end my life here. Natasha Romanoff quietly looked around the cold and cramped interrogation room, herself tied up with ropes and a collar. What are you observing? I told you. Don't even think about escaping from here. Kyle came back to his senses from his blueprint for the future, looked at Natasha Romanoff, whose head was spinning, and said coldly. Natasha Romanoff complained in a low voice with a hint of reluctance on her pretty face. We can do that, but can you untie me first so that we can all be more comfortable? Comfortable? What nonsense! Kyle glared at her coldly, then said in a gentle tone, Natasha Romanoff, is your dream just to become stronger? If I can make you stronger, do you still want to return to the Red Room organization? You want to turn me against the organization? Natasha Romanoff's eyes went blank. She refused directly and said, It's not my choice whether to go back to the Red Room or not. If I betray the organization, they will send agents to kill me. If you join me, you will still be afraid of the Red House organization. Kyle snorted coldly, but also fell into silent thought. Now the persuasiveness of his words is not high. No matter how strong an individual is, he can hardly defeat the elite agent organization of a superpower. Although he is a major general of the United States, the human resources at his disposal are basically from the country. He didn't yet have the cards that would make Natasha Romanoff betray the Red Room. So this conversation would have to be left for later. Think about it on your own first. There's really not much I can promise you right now, but from now on, I can at least guarantee your personal safety. As Kyle spoke, he stood up from his chair, reached behind his back to pull out the sodium carbon steel sword that he had put on, and slashed it lightly forward. The next moment, the ropes tied around Natasha Romanoff's waist broke and fell to the ground. One day in the future, you will understand that the choice I give you today is a gift that even God cannot give you. Kyle said this confidently, opened the door of the inquiry room, and was about to leave. Natasha Romanoff quickly said, At least take this collar off my neck. Just stay here. I'll have someone deliver meals to you regularly. Don't even think about escaping from here. Kyle shrugged, walked out the door, and locked the security door behind him. If the other party wants to escape, we can just send an American army to guard him back and forth, and he will probably be able to escape. But if the other party really has the slightest desire to leave the Red Room, then she will accept that she is in an inescapable state of confinement and stay there. This is also a little psychological game. The battleship was about to set sail, and Kyle planned to leave things to be dealt with slowly after this battle. Really left. Natasha Romanoff, who was left alone in the inquiry room, sat sullenly in the chair, her head tilted slightly as she thought about Kyle's suggestion. Betray the Red Room and join his side? No matter how you look at it, this is the worst option. Natasha Romanoff scratched her head in annoyance and simply laid on the table without thinking about it. On the deck of the battleship, The midday sun was shining directly under the scorching sun. Thousands of American soldiers in combat uniforms and holding guns stood in neat rows, their eyes looking forward, focused on the cool young man wearing a general's uniform jacket. The anchor has been raised. Navy sailors are in place at all positions on the battleship. The captain and the deputy captain are ready in the control center room. All combat soldiers are fully equipped. Get ready for battle. Fury finished his report, put down the communicator in his hand, and saluted the young man at the fence of the bow. The departure time is coming. Major General Kyle, please give the order. Kyle nodded, looked at the boundless sea, and said in a cold voice, "Then let's set sail. The destination is the Normandy coast." Yes, Fury nodded and immediately contacted the other end of the communicator. Soon, the warships took the lead and officially set sail as the vanguard of the warships, breaking through the waves and heading straight forward. At the same time, hundreds of other warships anchored nearby also set sail, sailing across the waves in a mighty force covering several miles of sea. In addition to the uneasy waves on the sea, thousands of fighter planes came from the sky like a swarm of bees leaving their nests, densely occupying the air territory and moving in almost the same direction. The Triple Alliance has deployed more than 2 million soldiers. There are countless weapons and ammunition. You can imagine how brutal the upcoming landing battle will be. Kyle, standing at the bow of the battleship, also took off his general's coat, completely revealing his one-piece black Venom battlesuit. He had a sodium carbon steel sword on his back. His right hand and arm were completely covered with a cold vibranium arm guard. Dual energy pistols were on the sides of his calves, and a new gravity magnet was attached to his belt, making him look fully armed. Fury touched Kyle's side and whispered, "Kyle, don't rush so hard this time. You are a major general and the commander that the enemy focuses on." Kyle smiled and said, "Well, aren't you in charge of the rear command of the army I lead?" "I'm worried." Before he could finish his words, Fury realized that he had said the wrong thing and spread his hands helplessly. Kyle is really not someone he should worry about. After all, he has never been an officer who only talks on paper, but a real super soldier on the battlefield. Fury explained, "After our warships arrive at the opposite coast, the Allied forces will be divided into 5 armies and land on the beach separately. The warships and fighter planes will cooperate with us to suppress the enemy's tanks and fortresses. The army will continue to attack forward, occupy all the places it reaches, eliminate the enemy, and completely liberate France occupied by the German army first. You just need to give us a direction and scope for the attack." Kyle said coldly. Offensive combat is his area of expertise. Chapter 64. Venom suit form France's Gold Coast, one of the 5 key beaches to visit. The sand on the Gold Coast beach is very fine, so it shines like gold under the sunlight. Combined with the coconut trees on the beach, it is also a good tourist and leisure attraction. At this time in the Gold Coast, the sun is setting and only the bright red sunset glow remains in the sky, indicating that a long night is about to come. On the coastline, countless sandbags were built into a fortress defense line about 100 meters from the shore. Tens of thousands of German soldiers wearing steel helmets were stationed here, showing only heavy firepower machine guns. They all held their breath solemnly, their faces tense. No one spoke, and the only sounds on the shore were the sound of the sea breeze and the waves hitting the shore. It's like the eve of a storm, calm yet filled with murderous intent. "Haven't our elite tank troops arrived from the rear yet?" a German general asked in a low voice to the communicator next to him. The communicator responded quickly. "Report, the rear troops said they were bombed by fighter planes from the Triple Alliance enemy, and their movements were restricted everywhere, so they couldn't get to the coastal defense area in time. These damned Allied troops. Notice them to defend the coastal defense line and shoot all the enemy troops landing on the beach. No matter what, we have to hold out until the tank troops in the rear arrive." Before the German officer finished his order, he saw the communicator staring at the sea beyond the sandbags in shock, with a pale and fearful look on his young face. The German officer immediately raised his head and looked in the direction he was looking, only to see dozens of warships looming above the darkening sea, covering the entire sea area within his field of vision. with the leading battleships heading straight towards the coastal beach like steel monsters. Here they come. They are coming. Crack. Suddenly, the sound of countless German soldiers taking a deep breath and then loading their weapons could be heard on the coastal defense line. The large-scale landing war is officially here. First came the long-range artillery strikes from the Allied forces. The muzzles of the battleships and warships were pointed at the beach coast, and the roar of concentrated artillery fire began an indiscriminate and destructive bombardment. With full firepower, the coastal beach and the sky are illuminated brightly. At this time, in the waters near the Gold Coast, the battleships stopped on the sea first, and the surrounding warships followed suit. The seawater was no longer deep enough for the warships to sail further ahead. However, the purpose of deploying so many warships was not to use them as main weapons to destroy the enemy's defenses. Instead, it serves as a means of transportation to carry soldiers' combat power while covering large-scale combat troops landing on the coastal beaches. As soon as dozens of warships docked, a steady stream of Allied soldiers from the warships went into the sea, and using hundreds of small boats that were lowered, they landed on the beach and launched an attack. As soon as some Allied soldiers stepped onto the beach of the Gold Coast, the machine guns of the German defense fortresses instantly started working, and the beach was turned into a forbidden zone with a hail of fire. The Allied soldiers could only rely on their bodies to keep clearing a path forward, and their blood dyed the nearby sea and beach red. The battle for beach landing has just begun, and it is a war of attrition where human lives are as precious as ants. Well, where's Kyle? Fury looked around on the battleship deck, only to find that when he ordered the troops to seize the beach, Kyle had disappeared. Fury. A cold and steady voice suddenly came from the highest observation deck of the battleship. Fury raised his head following the voice and looked towards the edge of the observation deck, where Kyle, dressed in a black battle suit, stood tall. "I'll leave the command of the rear to you." Kyle said this in a cold voice, and then jumped down from the observation deck, which was 50 meters above the deck and nearly 100 meters above the sea. Under Fury's horrified gaze, Kyle jumped down from a height. The back of his black battle suit suddenly stretched out a pair of devil-like wings. He immediately fell from free fall and glided quickly to the beach. Venom suit wing form. This is the ability transformation that Venom unlocked after the symbiosis with Blue Eagle. It's a pity that Venom has not grown enough and cannot fly with the help of his transformed wings, but it is more than enough for high-altitude gliding. Under the cover of the night environment, the Venom suit, with its built-in stealth ability, can move around freely like a fish in water. Kyle swooped and glided high in the sky, swiftly crossing the shallow sea and the beach covered with bullets, and silently broke into the air 10 meters above the German defense fortress. Looking down indifferently at the dense enemy group below, Kyle canceled the wing form of his battle suit and fell downward. While still in the air, he stretched out his left hand to his waist and threw down a piece of anti-magnetism. The moment the anti-magnetic field hit the ground, the gravity field within a radius of 20 meters doubled. The German soldiers within the range staggered and fell to the ground in discomfort. At the same time, Kyle just landed on the ground, rolling on the soft sand to relieve the force, and his left hand had already grasped the sodium carbon steel sword. He jumped up like a wild beast and rushed towards the machine gun that was still spewing blue flames. With a swing of his sword, the German gunman and the machine gun he was holding were cut into two pieces in an instant. Enemy! The German soldiers in the gravity field struggled to stand up. Just as they raised their guns, they saw Kyle, bathed in the blood of his companions, rushing towards them swiftly with a bloody sword in his hand. Countless bullets landed on Kyle's Venom suit that was strong enough to protect against ordinary bullets, and all of them were bounced away. However, those that landed on the vibranium arm guard on his right hand that was protecting his head fell without even a spark or a sound. Venom, covering the whole body, Kyle whispered in a deep voice, and the next moment, black threads of venom quickly covered the face and head above the neck, forming a black hood that looked ferocious and evil like a demon. In this way, Venom is like an integrated battle suit, covering Kyle's entire body without any omissions, making him look more like a human-shaped demon. Full body coverage is the true integrated form of venom and host symbiosis. The strength of both can be integrated into one without hindrance. Although the strength and speed are not improved much, they can be used more smoothly and perfectly. The reason why Kyle didn't want to cover his whole body was because he would be addicted to war and killing, cold and heartless, without any compassion for others on the outside or inside. But now, surrounded by the enemy and under the rain of bullets, only when he is fully covered with the venom suit can he exert his combat power to the extreme. Kyle indifferently dropped his right arm, letting the bullets hit his hideous hood head-on, and rushed into the enemy group with a sword, slashing and sweeping, or using his right fist with a vibranium arm guard to knock soldiers away, constantly reaping the lives of enemy soldiers who were struggling to resist. In just 10 seconds, within the range of the anti-magnetic gravity amplification, dozens of well-equipped German soldiers turned into broken corpses and fell in a pool of blood. The scarlet sticky blood dyed the black battle suit dark red. Kyle stepped on the corpses of countless soldiers and launched an endless and crazy killing. Chapter 65. Lone Wolf at Night. The sun has completely set below the horizon, and the night is like a black fog covering the city streets on the French coast. Bang! Da-da-da! The defense line on the front line beach had long since collapsed, and the continuous artillery fire and gunfire covered the entire area within a radius of more than 10 miles. The Triple Alliance attacked head-on, and the German soldiers fought desperately. The two sides were in chaos, and powerful gunfire rang out continuously at night, illuminating the ground with a bloody scene like hell. Countless corpses and debris were everywhere. Broken helmets, empty magazines, guns, and bullet shells were scattered all over the ground, and blood was dripping and gathering together. It really looked like a bloody rain. The war was not over yet. It was just beginning. Tonight is destined to be a sleepless night, filled with killing and gunpowder smoke. And it is also an unprecedented battle that the people of the great country do not want to recall in the future. At this time, the edge of the city streets. Devil. He is a devil. Retreat. Everyone retreat. Unlike other local areas of the war where soldiers from both sides were in a stalemate, the battle here was completely one-sided. More than a dozen well-armed German soldiers, with pale faces, ran backwards for their lives with fear. Not far behind them, in the darkness of the street alley, a tall and strong humanoid monster slowly followed them step by step, holding a bleeding one-handed sword. The humanoid monster seemed to be covered with a layer of dark keratin membrane, with perfect muscle contours and streamlined appearance. If it weren't for the illumination of the artillery fire, it would have blended into the night. Scarlet and slender eyes, ferocious fangs, and a wild body outline. This is the original form of Kyle's whole body covered with venom. In the streets and alleys behind him, more than a dozen bodies of soldiers cut in half were lying on the ground, and fresh blood was still spilling out to clean the floor. Grenade! Throw all the grenades! Over! The German officer leading the team shouted in fear, and the remaining soldiers immediately followed suit and threw all the grenades they had back at them. Boom, boom, boom! The explosions caused by the grenades were connected in a series, completely blocking half of the street passage and the collapsed houses around block Kyle's figure. The German officer breathed a sigh of relief, sat on the ground with his legs weak and numb, and laughed out loud to vent his fear. Ha ha, that monster is dead. Finally dead. His words came in shock, but he didn't know when he felt a bone-chilling chill from behind him, and the shadow cast by the tall figure enveloped his body. Captain, behind you. The other dozen or so German soldiers looked behind the officer, as if they had seen the most terrifying thing in their lives, and they stepped back trembling uncontrollably. The German officer lost the strength to stand up or even turn his head. His teeth were chattering as he spoke hoarsely. Shoot, keep shooting, shoot. The tip of the sharp one-handed sword fell from above his head and easily pierced through the entire head of the German officer. Captain, more than a dozen German soldiers roared with tears in their eyes. Their grief and anger turned into courage. They overcame their fear and pointed their guns at the dark shadow behind the German officer's body and fired. The next moment, dense swarms of bullets hit the black shadow, and it fell to the ground, showing how futile their final counterattack was. Tap, tap, pulling the one-handed sword away from his head, Kyle used his venom armor to withstand the dense rain of bullets. With a leaning sprint, he closed the distance between him and the enemy by a few meters. He swung his sword horizontally, and the soldiers fell to the ground one after another like wheat being harvested in a wheat field. The battle situation in this small area soon returned to its original silence. Kyle didn't know how many enemy soldiers he had killed in this way. It was all meaningless. Immersed in the killing atmosphere of the night, his body was still in a highly excited state. After silently looking at the enemy corpses, Kyle was about to move deeper into the war zone again. But suddenly, he saw a scene on the street in the distance out of the corner of his eye and immediately stopped in his tracks. Less than 100 meters away, on the street, there was a team of about 10 German soldiers engaged in a fierce firefight with an enemy. The man was still struggling with his gun, but soon he threw away the gun and rushed towards the group of German soldiers without fear of death. Just like a lone wolf hunting its prey, the man rushed forward facing the bullets, holding a cold weapon like a claw in his hand, making a desperate gesture. I don't know whether to say it was courageous or stupid. He rushed towards 10 guns with plenty of ammunition without any protection. The result can be imagined. Kyle watched this scene coldly and wanted to leave, but the next moment, the reversal of the 1-on-10 battle made him tremble physically and mentally. But the man not only did not die under the gun, but he successfully rushed into the German soldiers, and the sharp claw weapon in his hand quickly harvested the lives of the soldiers. Blood splattered everywhere, and the speed of killing was only faster than him. Almost in the blink of an eye, 10 German soldiers in the field of vision fell to the ground dead, and only the man was seen standing alone at the scene, and he quickly disappeared in the night. The hood of Venom's battle suit turned into black silk and fell off, revealing the handsome face of Kyle inside. At this moment, his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. It can't be him. How is this possible? This is the Marvel movie world, the world of the Avengers. How could that person exist? Kyle didn't hesitate at all. He immediately pedaled and sprinted towards the place as fast as possible. In a few seconds, Kyle arrived at the scene of the fight and quickly looked around to confirm. But there were only 10 broken bodies lying in a pool of blood on the ground. The lone wolf man was no longer seen. Kyle checked the fatal wounds on the bodies of the German soldiers one by one. Most of them were on the neck and chest. There were 3 claw marks deep into the white bones. Basically, they were killed by a clean blow. His mind was wavering, and he could not calm himself down. Is that really the person? Kyle fell into deep thought, and soon as if he realized something, he turned around sharply and looked towards the corner of the alley beside the street where he was. In the darkness of the night in the corner, a middle-aged man in Soviet soldier combat uniform walked out indifferently, leaned against the corner of the alley, took out a cigarette and lighter from his pocket, and slowly lit it for himself. He had a cool head of short black hair and a beard covering both sides of his face. His face was rugged and very masculine. The middle-aged man took a puff of cigarette with enjoyment, looked coldly at Kyle, standing next to the dead body of the German soldier, and asked while blowing white smoke, "Who are you, an American soldier?" Chapter 66. Wolverine in the Marvel Universe. If you ask Kyle about his favorite hero in the entire Avengers Universe series in his past life, he might not be able to answer right away. But if you ask me which character I like most in the entire Marvel movie series, it must be Wolverine. Wolverine? Looking at the weathered uncle smoking a cigarette in the corner, Kyle couldn't help but speak. He never thought that he would meet the man in front of him in this battle. "Who are you?" The old man glanced at him in surprise. Kyle took a deep breath and introduced himself. "My name is Kyle, a major general in the U.S. Army. A major general officer. Would such a high rank show up alone on a battlefield deep behind enemy lines?" The weathered uncle looked at Kyle suspiciously, as if he had never heard of the rumors about American heroes. He asked again, "How old are you?" 23, almost 24. Kyle shrugged and took a step forward. When he was completely within 3 meters of the weathered uncle, the message on the ability card on the other party was suddenly clearly visible. Proficient in Soviet language. Proficient in yoga. Proficient in true assassination. Proficient in true rifle. Proficient in true fighting. Proficient in true ancient martial arts. Proficient in true two-sword style. At a glance, it is impossible to count how many white and green cards there are. Just looking at the green ability cards for fighting skills, There are probably hundreds of them. Even if Kyle continued to collect photos from the US military, covering hundreds of thousands of soldiers and officers, there were only about 30 of them. What does it mean to have more than 100 green fighting ability cards? It means you have mastered almost half of the fighting skills on Earth. This also indirectly expresses how many brutal battles the man in front of him had to go through to acquire such fighting skills. And that's not all. Kyle's gaze finally fell on the old man and the two ability cards, one dark blue and one light blue. Lone Wolf Gene. Gene mutation resulting in a mutant physique and temperament like a lone wolf. A rare blue ability card. 3 sharp bone claws can be extended from the palms of both hands and between the fingers. The claws are connected to the arm bones and are tough and sharp. The human body tends towards wolf nature and acquires the wolf's talents. The wolf's strength and speed increase. The body's reactions become as sharp as those of a wild beast. The eyesight is sharp. The nose has a strong sense of smell. It is naturally warlike and is used to being alone, killing, and hunting prey. Due to the innate habits of lone wolves, they are naturally solitary and not used to living in groups. When they go wild and rampage, they will start killing uncontrollably. Current status. Rare blue prefix restriction cannot be extracted. In terms of lethality alone, the lone wolf physique is far superior to the super soldier physique. This is Kyle's analysis and evaluation after reading the rare blue ability card, Lone Wolf Gene. His super soldier is an all-around improvement in physical fitness based on human foundation, while the Lone Wolf Gene is the wolf's extreme wildness. The former is in a stable state, while the latter is more lethal. It's fine if he has such a perverted lone wolf physique card, but Uncle Song also has one. Self-healing factor. Self-healing factor existing in the human body. Blue ability card. The self-healing factor circulates throughout the body at all times with the blood, is attached to the bone marrow and cannot be removed, and even exists in every modified gene cell of the organism. All self-injuries can be healed naturally and quickly with the help of the self-healing factor. Even life-threatening injuries can be restored to their original state within half a day. Although sodium carbon steel can inhibit the self-healing factor, it can only inhibit it. The wound can still be healed in enough time. The self-healing factor will infinitely slow down the aging of the body and prolong life. Current status can be extracted and can be possessed simultaneously with physical enhancement abilities. Lone Wolf Gene, self-healing factor. Is it really Wolverine? If it's not him, who else would have such a perverted and extreme physique? Kyle was shocked, but his face remained calm. He looked at the old man and said, "I've introduced myself. What about you, Uncle?" "I'm just a Soviet Army soldier. There's nothing much to introduce myself to." The weathered uncle waved his hand, threw his cigarette but on the ground, and was about to leave alone. He still didn't quite believe that Kyle was an American major general or something like that. Even if he was, it had nothing to do with him. Wait a moment. Kyle tried to persuade him to stay, but the weathered old man quickened his pace and left towards the other end of the street. Kyle narrowed his eyes and also quickened his pace to follow behind. I don't want to miss it like this. There are no mutants in this world. This is what he learned at the training base before, but now he meets a man who looks like Wolverine. How can he not be surprised? It's really annoying. The weathered uncle ran, glanced back at Kyle, who was following closely, and couldn't help but speed up his pace. And soon his speed exceeded the normal running speed of a normal person. But soon, he found that Kyle was still following closely behind him, like a sticky plaster, and he couldn't get rid of him. "What do you want? Do you want me to attack you?" The old man stopped, turned around, and said coldly, "Are you alone? Don't you have any comrades or brothers on the battlefield with you?" Kyle looked around to confirm. From now until now, he hasn't seen any trace of other people. If the person before him was really the Wolverine he knew, then where was the other party's big brother Sabretooth? The old man snorted coldly. "No comrade can match me." "Brother? I have never had any brothers." "No brothers?" Kyle frowned. The other party didn't seem to be lying. This uncle really was like a lone wolf. Kyle thought about it and reached into the holster of the energy pistol on the side of his feet. Just as the old man's eyes became alert, he materialized a box of cigarettes and threw it over there. "I see you've run out of cigarettes, so I'll give you a pack." The old man took the cigarette quickly, glanced at the box cover, and nodded slightly with satisfaction. It's an American brand, not bad. He looked at Kyle again, his expression slightly more relaxed. Tell me, what do you want from me? You look like an old friend of mine. Please tell me your name. Once I know your name, I won't follow you anymore. Kyle said urgently. If you are American, then you have never seen me. I have never been to America. The old man said, turned around and walked away, waving his hand and saying, My name is Logan Stryker. Stay alive and see you after the battle. His lone wolf-like figure soon disappeared into the endless darkness of the war-zone streets and was never seen again. Logan Stella. Even the last name is different. Kyle stood there, muttering to himself, his eyes full of complicated meanings. He now understood that the other party was not the well-known Wolverine, but a similar person in this parallel world of Marvel. Similar appearance, ability, experience, but not that person. Chapter 67. Confrontation with Logan. Dawn gradually approached, and when the first rays of morning sun shone down from the sky of the Gold Coast, the nightmarish night in the marginal city of France gradually dissipated. At this time, the inland areas of the Gold Coast were completely devastated by war. Rotting corpses, gun shells, bloodstains, and scorched earth and smoke were everywhere, turning an area of more than 10 miles into an abandoned disaster site. Countless bodies of soldiers were piled up like hills and burned, and the air was filled with foul-smelling black smoke that made people nauseous. After a night passed, the large-scale beach landing war that lasted for more than 10 hours finally had a chance to take a short break. The German troops on the 5 beach fronts and the French edge urban areas were basically cleared. Of course, the Three Kingdoms Allied forces also suffered heavy casualties in their forced beach landing operations, but there were still more and more Allied soldiers transported to the rear to land and provide new blood for the continuous combat forces. So it seemed that their military strength increased rather than decreased. This was only the first day of the battle. The Triple Alliance had won a bitter victory. They had to step up their fighting pace, first completely invade France, eliminate German soldiers, and liberate territory, and then break into German territory. Early in the morning, most of the soldiers of the Three Kingdoms Allied forces rested on the spot, and new troops were deployed to attack and defend. Fury, whose lieutenant uniform was covered in blood and stains, was busy running around. He had just put down his rifle when he directed the troops he led to collect supplies and rest. While he had just completed his command post at the rank of Major General, he was looking for the communications soldier to inquire about Kyle's news. In fact, for one position, I have to worry about 3 things. What? You mean Major General Kyle? He seemed to be in the frontline combat zone last night. I saw it last night too. Major General Kyle is so strong that he directly wiped out the German troops that were blocking our combat team. Yes, he killed several soldiers at every step. I don't know how many German soldiers who encountered him turned and fled, shouting devil. He was so fast that I could only see a figure passing by, and then I couldn't catch up with him anymore. Fury even asked American soldiers from different units, but they only gave him words of admiration and praise like this, and he didn't get any specific information about their whereabouts. However, Fury felt relieved knowing that Kyle was fine and had been actively engaged in offensive operations at the front line. Although I believe in Kyle's ability, I still can't help but worry about his safety. This is probably the friendship between true comrades. At this time, the border between the edge of French territory and the major cities in the interior is also the current frontline combat area. The Allied forces that attacked here were still very few, and there was not a single German soldier to be seen on the streets of the small town. It was as quiet as an empty city. The crisp sound of a lighter rang out somewhere. After the cigarette, but was lit, the owner took a few deep puffs and exhaled a large cloud of white smoke. Logan sat alone on the 3rd-floor rooftop of an abandoned building, smoking silently, with 2 German rifles placed at his feet. They looked like they were picked up or robbed, and he didn't have the time to maintain them. For him, the gun only serves to conceal the fact that he is an ordinary veteran. When it comes to a real life-and-death battle, only the sharp claws hidden in his hands are more reliable. However, he has lived for more than half a century and faced countless life-and-death situations, but he still survived alone as if it were a curse, like a lone wolf who was unwilling but had to succumb to fate. After taking the last puff, Logan threw the cigarette on the ground and stomped it out, then fumbled into his pocket and pulled out a sharp cowhide saber. He then took off his Soviet combat uniform, revealing his lean and strong body, with not a single scar on his bronze skin. As if he was used to it, Logan had a calm face and kept stabbing himself with the saber. The bullets remaining in his body were picked out by the tip of the knife and rolled onto the rooftop balcony with blood. Within 5 seconds, the bullet hole healed itself at a speed visible to the naked eye. Is this the main reason why you like to fight alone and say that no comrades can match you? A steady and powerful young male voice suddenly came from the building behind. Logan stood up suddenly, holding a saber in his hand and looking at the source of the sound with a ferocious beast's eyes, only to see a young man in black combat uniform standing leisurely on the top floor of another building. "You followed me?" Logan asked coldly, his eyes filled with murderous intent. "It's not really tracking. I just killed the enemy all the way here and happened to see you." Kyle shrugged and said slowly, "You don't have to be so hostile to me. We are allies now, and we are the same kind of people." As he said this, under Logan's astonished gaze, Kyle jumped forward a little faster, and with a jumping ability 4 times that of an ordinary person, he easily jumped over the height of a street and landed on the roof of the building where Logan was. Logan frowned and was silent for a moment before commenting, "Your physique is not that of a normal human. Otherwise, how could he become a major general in the U.S. Army at such a young age?" Kyle said with a smile. He didn't tell the truth. Although he was not following closely, he was following the bodies of enemy soldiers killed by claw marks all the way. The reason why he keeps chasing after him is not because the other party is Wolverine from the Avengers world. In fact, it doesn't matter whether the other party is Wolverine or not. More importantly, he has the self-healing factor ability that Kyle has always dreamed of drawing, as well as an extra 70 green fighting skill cards. A super soldier, plus the self-healing factor, and hundreds of green fighting cards. This will allow Kyle to perfectly reach the peak combat power level that humans ideally desire. Who sent you here? A 5-star general from the United States? Or a scientist from some research laboratory? Logan was coldly on guard against Kyle, who was approaching him. He clenched his fists, and 3 sharp bone claws protruded ferociously from the ends of his fists. "I said, I mean no harm." Kyle spread his hands, but as soon as he took a step forward, Logan had already fully extended his bone claws and confronted him at a distance of 5 meters. Perhaps it was because of too many unbearable experiences that the man in front of her was too defensive. Kyle frowned slightly, looking at Logan, who was entering combat mode like a lone wolf, and for a moment he didn't know what to do. To draw a blue ability card, you must be within 1 meter and read it continuously for half an hour. Kyle originally wanted to show goodwill to Logan by letting down his guard, and as a comrade in arms, he moved within 1 meter of him and tried to read the opportunity. It now seems too difficult to negotiate with Logan in this state. If negotiations fail, then we can only try to fight, which is the last helpless choice. Kyle knew very well that if he wanted to defeat Logan with his current self, he would have to be prepared to die and use all his trump cards to prepare for the battle. Chapter 68: Kyle versus Logan at dawn. On the rooftop, a young man in black combat uniform and a weathered old man with his muscular upper body naked were facing each other at a distance of 5 meters. The atmosphere was solemn and depressing, and they could engage in a life-and-death fight at any time. Needless to say, Kyle, whose rank of Major General was formed by the piles of corpses of German soldiers, was a war hero symbolizing strength and conquest, a meat grinder on the battlefield, and a devil butcher. Logan, the Wolverine in this world, is a lone wolf who has been experiencing encounters and separations throughout his life. Ever since his genetic mutation gave him the lone wolf gene and the self-healing factor, he has been destined to continue experiencing the wars and chaos of different eras. When these two people with murderous auras confronted each other, even the air on the top floor of the building was filled with a faint smell of blood and murderous atmosphere. Do I really have to go this far to extract the self-healing factor card? Kyle clenched his fists, and every muscle in his body was tense. Facing a strong enemy like Wolverine, he didn't know whether he was afraid or excited. He reached behind his back with his left hand to grasp the slightly protruding hilt of the sword and pulled the sharp and slender sodium carbon steel sword out of the leather sheath. No matter what, this opportunity must not be missed. Although it would be safer to arrange troops to assist in capturing Logan after the battle, the enemy would most likely leave the battlefield early and find a chance to hide in other parts of the world. There is an ability card that is hard to come by. There is no reason to retreat because of fear of the risk of battle. When Kyle thought of this, his eyes became more determined and bright than ever before. He tightly grasped the one-handed sword in his left hand and clenched his right hand, which was wearing a vibranium arm guard, into a fist. Rolling, Venom was also expressing his joy. Without Kyle's reminder, countless black threads emerged from the logo on the chest of his suit, turning into a black hood that covered Kyle's face. "Come on," Logan growled, holding his wolf-like claws in front of him with both hands. All the hair on his body seemed to explode and stand up. The natural sensitivity of the beast made him realize that the young man in front of him was very dangerous. Even in the past half-century, we have only encountered one or two enemies as strong as this one. Tread. Almost at the same time, the two men burst out and rushed towards each other. Both of them were good at offensive combat, so there was no reason for them to let the other take the initiative. The distance was 5 meters, but in the blink of an eye, the two figures collided violently at an extremely fast speed. Logan's claws collided with the vibranium arm guard on Kyle's right arm first, and the wolf-shaped bone claws suffered a slight disadvantage and lost power. There was a flash of surprise in Logan's eyes, and he quickly flipped his claws with superb skills, rubbing the surface of the vibranium arm guard towards Kyle's body. Kyle reacted quickly and swung his sword to block, narrowly intercepting the 3 sharp claws that were reaching for his chest. Then, the sodium carbon steel sword and the wolf-shaped claws kept colliding in the air, making a series of crisp and sharp sounds. The fight between the two became more and more intense. Sweat was pouring down their faces, and the rooftop floor was occasionally scratched with long sword and claw marks. Logically speaking, with Logan's hundreds of fighting skills, Kyle's comprehensively improved super soldier physique alone is not enough to make up for the gap, and he will soon fall into a disadvantage. However, with the Venom suit's comprehensive coverage that increased his physical fitness, and the vibranium arm guards that restrained his highly offensive claws, he managed to slow down the fierce and brutal battle into a long-lasting stalemate. This is what Kyle wanted to see. Fortunately, at this stage of the world, Logan's claws and body bones have not yet been integrated with the adamantium metal, otherwise he would not have gained any advantage with the vibranium arm guards. At this time, the restrictions on combat ranges from 1 meter to half a meter have also been met. Kyle held his breath and put all his energy into the fight with Logan. On the other hand, he began to focus on the ability card on the opponent. He was considering drawing the blue ability card that did not have the self-healing factor. It was impossible to maintain a reading time of half an hour within 1 meter in the current battle, so he could only start with the green rare fighting ability card that could gradually make up for the difference in skills. True fighting mastery. Perfectly master the extremely lethal fighting skills. A rare green ability card. True ancient martial arts combat mastery. Perfectly master the ancient and primitive fighting techniques. A rare green ability card. Each card only takes 3 minutes to load, and only the fighting skill ability cards with the prefix green rare can make Kyle feel the improvement of his skills. Tap, 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 pissed. On the rooftop, Kyle and Logan were entangled in a desperate fight. Every blow of sword and claw could have taken the other's life, but they were all resolved by the other with exquisite skills. This is how masters of fighting skills fight, countering each opponent's moves and integrating fighting into the body's attack. In addition, the physiques of both men surpassed those of ordinary people. In the flying dust, the two figures kept fighting back and forth in close combat so that the roof seemed to be collapsing. This battle lasted for more than 10 minutes. When both sides began to get tired, it was also the easiest time to decide the winner. 3 sharp claws whizzed through the air, splashing blood, and forced the black figure back several steps. Logan's face flushed. His eyes were filled with murderous intent, and his outstretched wolf-shaped claws were stained with scarlet blood. Directly opposite him, Kyle was panting and covering his chest with his right palm. Even the venom suit there was torn smoothly, revealing 3 deep claw scars. I'm sorry. Although we are allies, you know my secret, and you must die here. Logan looked at the tired and injured Kyle coldly. After just a short break in the battle, his rapid breathing began to slow down. The self-healing factor is really lacking here. Kyle shook his head helplessly. He had anticipated this situation a long time ago. During this period of combat, the skills did make up for some of the losses by drawing cards. But even the super soldier's super endurance could not withstand a protracted battle with Logan, who had the lone wolf gene and the self-healing factor. It's all over, Logan said, his wolf-like claws dripping with blood, and he walked forward step by step indifferently. Is it over? Let's give it a try. Kyle took a deep breath, and regardless of the serious injuries on his body, he raised his sword and rushed towards Logan, as if making a final resistance. He had rehearsed this battle in his mind dozens of times before the battle, and he knew very well that he held the most crucial trump card, the only trump card that could defeat Logan with unlimited self-healing ability. It is the sodium carbon steel sword in the left hand that can suppress the self-healing factor. In the fierce battle of more than 10 minutes, Kyle's sodium carbon steel sword had been used to block the claws. Instead, he used the vibranium arm guard on his right hand to attack. He did not take the initiative to use the sodium carbon steel sword to leave a trace of injury on Logan's body for him to notice. This was all for this moment, the final blow to decide the outcome. Chapter 69. Unexpected incident on the rooftop. Kyle, who was wounded in the chest, held a one-handed sword in his left hand and rushed straight into Logan's arms. In everyone's eyes, this was the last desperate struggle. Logan looked ahead indifferently, as if waiting for his prey to come to him. Relying on his lone wolf physique and self-healing ability, he has forced his enemies into desperate situations countless times over the past few decades. That's how lone wolves like it when encountering a strong prey. Instead of calling for more companions to besiege it, he relies on his tenacious will and means to consume the opponent's physical strength alone, and then further kill the weak prey. In terms of attack, he has hundreds of fighting skills and wolf-shaped claws. In terms of defense and physical strength, he has a strong beast physique and self-healing factor. In Logan's opinion, Kyle was doomed to die the moment he attacked, because the one he was fighting was not just a human, but a lonely and arrogant beast that was already covered in scars. Tap tap. Seeing Kyle rushing to him, Logan, who had been standing still, suddenly moved. His claws stretched out swiftly and powerfully. In the blink of an eye, he stabbed Kyle's defenseless chest first. Kyle narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he didn't notice the sharp claws at all, and rushed forward regardless. Pust! A pair of sharp claws completely penetrated halfway through the cross symbol on Venom's armor, and Kyle's sprint came to an abrupt halt. But just before his movement completely stopped, he exhausted all the remaining strength in his body and poured it into his left hand, and also sent the tightly grasped one-handed sword into Logan's chest. Laugh! The sodium carbon steel sword pierced Logan's chest smoothly, and the tip of the sword came out from his back with blood. Trading injury for injury, you're really cruel to yourself. Logan was stunned. He never thought that besides himself, there would be someone else who would adopt such a suicidal way of fighting. Thank you for the compliment. If I'm not tough on myself, how can I possibly defeat a strong enemy like you? Kyle smiled, with dark red blood oozing from the corners of his mouth. His left palm was still on the hilt of the one-handed sword, and he gently pushed it forward. The two people who were in a stalemate retreated and separated, with blood spilling from their bodies. Cough, cough. Kyle coughed up blood with a pale face and sat down on the floor. 6 sharp claws had pierced his lungs. Venom anxiously extended the black silk repair suit to block the serious wound, but he could not stop the blood from flowing out. Logan fell backwards onto the ground, with the sodium carbon steel sword completely embedded in his chest, leaving only the delicate cross hilt exposed. He looked as if he had been nailed to the ground by the sword. It was obviously a lose-lose situation. How should I put it? You are one of the toughest opponents I have ever met. Logan kept panting and changed his words. If you take age into account, there is no other. You too. To be honest, I really don't want to fight a beast like you. Kyle sat on the ground and responded weakly. This was the most difficult battle he had ever faced since his rebirth, and the one that caused him the most serious injuries. The battle with Steve was just a fight of friendship, but this fight to the death with Logan was a fierce confrontation with his life at stake. What a pity. You won the battle, but I'm the one who survived in the end, Logan said as he stated the facts, retracted his wolf-shaped claws, and reached out to pull out the one-handed sword on his chest. But soon his expression changed slightly, and he found that he had no strength left, and his usual quick self-healing ability did not work to heal his severe chest injury. Kyle said softly, "Give it up. That sword is made of sodium carbon steel metal, which is specially designed to restrain the self-healing factor." Really? No wonder. It turns out you had this plan a long time ago. It seems that my loss is not unfair. Logan sighed thoughtfully after hearing this, and let go of his hands as if resigned, lying on the ground with a sense of relief. Can I ask what my fate will be? Will you take me back to the military-based dungeon prison, or send me to various research laboratories for experiments, or kill me on the spot? Logan whispered hoarsely, as if he was accustomed to the inhumane treatment he mentioned. I won't do that. After all, we didn't have to get to this point. Kyle stood up with difficulty and walked slowly towards Logan. Given his current physical injuries, he had to get the self-healing factor card as soon as possible. In fact, the purpose of fighting Logan is just to draw the ability card. If the negotiations have been successful beforehand, then everyone can find a place to sit down and have a drink and chat. This is what it means to be in heaven or hell in one thought. A simple choice turned into a life-and-death duel in an instant. Just as Kyle was about to approach Logan on the ground, he suddenly turned his head as if he had sensed something and cast sharp eyes toward a corner of the roof, his pupils shrinking slightly. At some point, there appeared another tall and burly bystander on the rooftop where the two men were fighting to the death. The man was a middle-aged man, wearing a large German officer's uniform. He had a rough and domineering face and a strong figure of 2 meters tall. He looked like a ferocious tiger about to start a killing. If it were a normal day with Kyle or Logan's keen sense, they would have noticed someone approaching long ago, but because they were so absorbed in the fierce battle, they didn't notice someone quietly coming to the rooftop. The big man seemed to know Logan on the ground and said calmly and indifferently, "Logan, I didn't expect you to fall to this level so quickly. I am really disappointed." "It's you." Logan, who had been lying on the ground and had given up resistance, suddenly widened his eyes after hearing this voice and stared at the big man with disgust. "In this way, I can easily take your life." The big man smiled grimly and spread out his hands, with 5 fingers each having sharp and tough claws. "Saber-tooth tiger?" Kyle was a little confused for a moment. He looked at the big man, then at Logan, and couldn't help but ask Logan, "Didn't you say you don't have any brothers?" "Brother? He is the enemy of my parents, lover, and son." Logan roared. If he had not been seriously injured, he would have stood up and fought the saber-toothed tiger to the death. "Same here. I joined the German army for this day to come. I just didn't expect it to come so soon and so suddenly." Sabertooth grinned, ignoring Kyle, who was standing seriously injured, constantly rubbing his sharp claws and nails, and walked towards Logan, who was struggling to draw his sword on the ground. In this world, even though they are no longer brothers, are they still lifelong enemies? Kyle, who was watching, quickly understood what was happening, and his face quickly turned cold. Logan hadn't even drawn his self-healing factor card yet, so how could he be killed by a saber-toothed tiger that suddenly appeared? It seems that the trump card that should be revealed has to be used inevitably. Kyle sighed and whistled towards the sky. The saber-toothed tiger immediately looked over here in surprise. In his eyes, both of them were seriously injured and on the verge of death, and posed no threat at all. Sabertooth said in a deep voice, "What do you want to do? When I kill Logan, I will naturally send you to hell with me. The body of an American hero should be very valuable in Germany." Kyle's eyes were cold. Despite being seriously injured, he still stood as tall as ever. He directly gave the saber-toothed tiger 3 words. "Think too much. Want to take advantage of him? It's not that easy." Chapter 70. The frustrated saber-toothed tiger overthinking. Kyle's tone was cold and mocking, which made Sabertooth's face darken on the spot. His already hot temper made the veins on his forehead stand out. His voice was low and cold. After I kill Logan first, I will use my sharp claws to make a hole in your stomach, pull out all your intestines, and hang you on the rooftop to bleed you. As he spoke, the saber-toothed tiger's fierce gaze fell back on Logan on the ground, and he swooped over with a low growl, wanting to be the first to deal with this enemy. Kyle watched coldly. His serious injuries were not enough to stop the other party, but he had called for help in advance. Just as the saber-toothed tiger leaped forward and its claws were about to land on Logan's neck, a huge amount of animal shadow carrying a hurricane fell from the sky, and its wings that blocked the sunlight flapped violently and slapped the saber-toothed tiger that was still leaping in the air back. The saber-toothed tiger, which was as big as a brown bear, was blown away from the rooftop of the third floor before it realized what was happening, and fell down the stairs, brushing against the guardrail. Want to snatch food from my mouth? Whether you are a saber-toothed tiger or a polar bear, stay away from me. Kyle sneered and looked at the blue eagle hovering a few meters above the roof. Blue Eagle was nodding his head towards him, as if he was also worried about his safety. I'm fine, Kyle said weakly. His face changed slightly, but the sound of sharp claws climbing the wall came from downstairs. The third floor is less than 10 meters high. It is indeed impossible to hurt a saber-toothed tiger that is stronger than Logan Lone Wolf's genetic physique. Quick, take him away first. Kyle waved his left hand lightly and decisively issued an order to the nearby Blue Eagle. Chirp! The Blue Eagle cried softly, swooped down obediently, and grabbed Logan, who was seriously injured and unable to move, on the ground with its eagle claws. Just when it was about to take Kyle with it, the saber-toothed tiger climbed up the wall on the side of the building again, growled, and pounced on the low-flying Blue Eagle with its sharp claws. Chirp! The injured Blue Eagle let out a mournful cry, and more than a dozen bloody blue feathers fell from its body. It flapped its wings at a very fast speed to increase its height, and quickly flew away from the rooftop with Logan. Damn it! The saber-toothed tiger's eyes widened, and he angrily cursed at the blue sky that was disappearing away from the Blue Eagle. Then he realized something and looked at Kyle, who was still lingering in the middle of the balcony. He said in a hoarse voice, "Did that huge amount of bird and beast obey your orders? Let it come back and hand Logan to me, and I can consider letting you go." Kyle smiled faintly. He was covered in wounds, and the floor beneath his feet had been stained with his own blood. His life force was fading, but he still slowly said 3 words to the saber-toothed tiger. Think too much. He was the only one who had the initiative to negotiate terms with others, and he had never been threatened before. Huh. Interesting. Are you planning to sacrifice yourself by staying here? The saber-toothed tiger laughed instead of getting angry. The claws on his left hand pressed against the guardrail of the rooftop, easily tearing apart the bricks and dust, leaving 5 smooth claw marks. I heard about it a long time ago in Germany. The American Kyle, codenamed the God of Death and the Devil in the military, is one of the top targets of the German military in the war. When the saber-toothed tiger said this, his eyes were slightly red and filled with brutality and savagery. He stared at Kyle and said coldly, I wonder if a war hero, at the moment of death, will also let out a weak wail like a woman. Sorry, you really think too much, Kyle said boringly, his face calm without a trace of panic. He calmly spread out his right hand, and in the palm of his hand, wrapped in vibranium metal, a green bean lay quietly. No matter how you look at it, it is just an ordinary mung bean, but it is full of green vitality, and you can vaguely feel the vigorous energy and mysterious magic contained within. This is one of the life-saving trump cards in the card space. Kyle looked at the mung bean with a hint of regret, then turned his right palm slightly and put the bean into his mouth, which was still bleeding. Poison? Or some stimulant? When the saber-toothed tiger saw this scene, his broad and rough face was slightly stunned. With the beast's natural keen sense, a bad premonition flooded from the bottom of his heart. No matter what the beans are, you can't let the other person eat them. The saber-toothed tiger made a judgment and immediately rushed towards Kyle, like a tiger hunting its prey, using its claws and nails to gather strength and pounce. Gaba. Kyle bit the beans in his mouth without hesitation and swallowed them together with the fishy blood. He looked at the sharp claws getting closer and closer in front of him, as if waiting for something. Plop, plop, plop. Kyle's originally severely injured and weak body, that failing and fragile heart, suddenly emitted a strong and powerful heartbeat, and a mysterious power instantly flowed through his body like a spring. The next moment, with a recovery effect far exceeding that of self-healing, within the blink of an eye, the claw marks that were deep enough to see the bones and the injuries to the internal organs were all healed. A dead man can be resurrected. Even a seriously injured dying person can be restored to peak physical condition with just one pill. This is the magical effect of the rare blue item card, Senza Beans. The power is back. Kyle opened his eyes wide. His blue eyes lit up. He looked at the saber-toothed tiger that was charging towards him, quickly raised his clenched right hand, and punched back without giving in. Bang! Vibranium arm guards right fist against tiger claw nails. Sabertooth was completely stunned. It didn't expect that Kyle, who looked seriously injured and dying, would recover in the blink of an eye and be in peak condition. What was even more terrible was that the sharp claws that he used at maximum force hit the vibranium arm guard, and all the power was completely lost without warning. Get out of my way! Kyle sneered. Without giving the opponent a chance, he quickly raised his left foot and slammed his knee into the saber-toothed tiger's abdomen, knocking the opponent out like a large ball again. The saber-toothed tiger smashed the guardrail of the rooftop and fell from the roof of the third floor again, tumbling and causing a cloud of dust. When he climbed up with a low growl and looked up, he saw Kyle standing tall on the parapet on one side of the rooftop, looking down coldly. "Are you sure you want to continue fighting with me?" Kyle said sarcastically. The saber-toothed tiger clenched his fists. His face turned blue with anger, and without even a word of response, he turned around and left quickly. He thought he was slightly stronger than Logan, but even Logan was defeated by him. After weighing each other's strengths again and again, he found that his chances of winning were basically zero. The main reason was that the opponent was too weird and mysterious, with giant birds and beasts, mysterious beings, special equipment, and his physique was not much inferior to his. No wonder the German army can't do anything to such a pervert. "Logan, I will take your life later." Sabretooth gritted his teeth and quickly ran away in the city streets. Chapter 71. Saber. Toothed Tiger Must Die. Kyle stood alone on the rooftop, which had been in ruins after several fierce battles. Within the field of vision, the burly figure of the saber-toothed tiger moved away in a somewhat embarrassed manner and disappeared after turning the corner of the street. He had no intention of continuing to pursue, as persuading the enemy to retreat with such strength was the best outcome. Saber-toothed tiger is far superior to Logan in both physique and strength. But because of this, his speed is a bit clumsy, and his fighting skills are far less rich and solid than Logan's. Therefore, the restraining effect of the vibranium arm guard on him is more obvious. But that was all. The sodium carbon steel sword was still stuck in Logan, who was taken away by Blue Eagle. Without the confidence and means to kill the saber-toothed tiger, Kyle had no desire to continue. After all, what is more important now is to draw the self-healing factor card on Logan first to avoid any unexpected accidents. Kyle thought of this and did not stay there any longer. The black figure flashed slightly and soon left the rooftop, sensing the location of the Blue Eagle and heading there quickly. 3 miles away from the small town, in a birch forest on the outskirts of the mountain. The sound, like a person screaming or a wild beast roaring, resounded throughout the forest, startling countless birds that had not yet been disturbed by the smoke of war. Below the forest, where a giant eagle was circling low in the sky, Logan kept roaring in pain on the ground, and the grass he rolled over was dyed bright red. A one-handed sword with sticky blood on it was stuck in the tree trunk. Obviously, it had just been pulled out forcibly. However, the wound caused by the sodium carbon steel sword still suppressed the vitality of the self-healing factor, so that the fatal wound on Logan's chest could not heal in time. If it were a normal human being, he would have died countless times before the sword was pulled out of his chest. It was only because of Logan's strong will that he was able to hold on despite the excessive blood loss. Oink, oink! A black figure quickly passed through the woods, crushing the fallen leaves with its military boots as it stopped in this area. The blue eagle, hovering at low altitude, saw the person coming and cried out joyfully, then flapped its injured wings as if it had completed its mission and flew back to the blue sky where the sun was shining. "You're here. Where's that man?" Logan raised his head hard, staring at the cold-blooded young man who had arrived in front of him. He covered his chest and struggled to get up from the grass. His whole strong body was soaked with sweat and blood, and he looked extremely miserable. "I forced him back," Kyle responded calmly, looking at the badly injured Logan indifferently. It can be said that there is no grudge or hatred between the two. To some extent, they are comrades and allied forces. It's just that Logan has the important card he wants to draw. The natural law of the survival of the fittest is just like that. Kyle has never been a kind person, driven by his absolute desire to become stronger. Even if he is given another chance to start over, he will still fight a desperate battle with the strong man Logan for a self-healing factor ability card. Although he has principles, bottom lines, and emotions, they are limited to people who stand on his side and do not include anyone on the opposite side. In the birch forest, Kyle glanced around, took a few steps forward, pulled out the sodium carbon steel sword from the blood-stained tree, held it in his hand again, and walked towards Logan. "Are you going to kill me here?" Logan's tone was weak and bitter. He held on to a birch tree beside him, his eyes full of unwillingness. He was unwilling to die like this. Die before the saber-toothed tiger. "I never said I wanted to kill you. But now that things have come to this, it's too late to negotiate. Even if I don't want to kill you, I can't let you go." Kyle stated the facts calmly. Even if he drew all the ability cards from Logan, given their current almost hostile relationship, he would not let the tiger go back to the mountains. "Then there's nothing to say." Logan nodded with a wry smile, and his empty right hand suddenly stretched out 3 sharp claws. Just when Kyle thought he would continue to resist, the tip of the claws touched his heart. Kyle narrowed his eyes and asked calmly, "What do you want to do?" "I want to negotiate again." Logan gritted his teeth, stared at Kyle in front of him, took a deep breath, and said, "I must have something you want. And this thing must have the restriction that I am alive. Otherwise, you would not have let the eagle beast save me on the rooftop just now, but let the man just now kill me." Indeed, the rescue order issued to Blue Eagle on the rooftop just now directly exposed the information. "I don't think your threat of suicide can be used as a bargaining chip." Kyle kept a straight face but sighed inwardly, because there was really nothing he could do at that time. Ability cards can only be drawn from living people, while item cards are similar to exploding equipment, which kills the item holder. "This is my only bargaining chip. How can I know if I don't try?" Logan said with difficulty, and the sharp claw of his right hand reached forward a little, completely piercing his skin. The self-healing factor was still suppressed, which also resulted in no self-healing movement at all on the body surface that was broken by the claws. Kyle was silent for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "Wait. What do you want to negotiate first?" "It seems that my bet was right." Logan breathed a sigh of relief and said coldly, "That man just now, the saber-toothed tiger, must die. That's no problem. I will kill him." Kyle nodded in agreement. Sabretooth is currently an officer in the German army. When the Triple Alliance invades Germany, they will have to deal with him sooner or later. Just agree to it now and calm Logan down first. Just as Kyle was thinking this, Logan in front of him shook his head and said, "No, I have to kill him myself, and you can only assist me." "Impossible." Kyle refused outright. This was too much. "As long as this condition is met, you can ask me to do anything from now on. Whether it's human experiments or using it as a killing weapon, I will obey directly." Logan finished speaking in a deep voice, and then slowly moved his claws deeper into his body, almost touching the depth of his heart, as if to express his firm attitude. The right to negotiate fell back to Kyle. Isn't it that he is negotiating with his own life, but with his own loyalty? Kyle fell silent again. This time he really weighed the negotiation conditions proposed by Logan in his mind. The opponent is now a lone wolf who is forced into a desperate situation. If he can be recruited under his command and firmly controlled, then the force created in the future will also have enough high-end combat power to support the situation. The only doubt is that there is a possibility of rebellion from the other party in the future. Kyle asked directly, "If I agree to your negotiation plan, how will you show your loyalty?" "I swear in the name of my father Strel and my mother Elrorin that as long as you can help me kill my enemies with my own hands, no matter what you ask me to do in the future, I will do it without any hesitation," Logan said seriously and looked at Kyle expectantly. "Very good. Then we have reached a preliminary consensus in the negotiations. Remember what you said today." Kyle shrugged and said decisively, "I will help you kill the saber-toothed tiger. No matter from which perspective, the saber-toothed tiger must die." Chapter 72. Breaking into the tank group a month later. Most of the more than 2 million Allied forces entered French cities, cleared out the remaining German troops, liberated most of the French territory, and then attacked the German territorial border. This is also the most difficult line of defense to break. The German steel tank troops and armored vehicle armed forces set up layers of heavy firepower defense lines in the border urban areas. The Allied forces of the Three Kingdoms, which had been advancing triumphantly all the way, suffered heavy losses from artillery bombing after arriving at the combat zone of the German defense line. Tens of thousands of vanguard troops were isolated outside the defense line. As long as we break through this line of defense, our army will be able to drive straight into the heart of Germany and even capture the enemy's capital in one fell swoop. Fury, who was leading one of the Allied vanguard troops, frowned, poked his head out from the broken wall, and looked half a mile away through a military telescope. The giant tanks lined up in a row like a steel fortress, with countless black gun muzzles slanting towards the area ahead. Everyone understands the truth, but it is not so easy to break through the enemy tank's defense line. This is not an armed force that can be made up by the difference in numbers. Any number of soldiers who go up will just be cannon fodder and die in vain. Fury waved his hand and asked a frontline communicator, "Where are our bombers? Why haven't they come to support us yet?" The correspondent who had just finished telegraphing to the rear reported, "Germany has sent almost all of its fighter planes to the air, which has greatly affected the bombing mission of our fighter planes. It is estimated that they will not be able to come here in the next few days. Without aircraft and tank reinforcements, are we going to have to use the soldiers' bodies to break through this heavy firepower line?" Fury gritted his teeth, thinking about a solution, and the face of a cold young man flashed through his mind. If he were here, there would definitely be a way to break through this war zone's defense line. Fury sighed. Kyle had disappeared from the frontline combat zone a month ago, and no soldier had seen him since. Where did Kyle go? With his strength, he would not leave the battlefield for no reason if something happened during the journey. Fury was lost in thought when suddenly a group of soldiers exclaimed nearby. "Lieutenant Fury!" Two people on motorcycles rushed towards the tank defense line in front. One of them should be Major General Kyle. Major General Kyle. The communicator held a telescope in one hand and excitedly patted the earth-covering ground with the other. "Kyle?" Fury's heart was shocked. He didn't care where his telescope was. He snatched the telescope from the communicator and looked towards the battle area ahead. At this moment, the German tank troops seemed to react. Several tanks were aimed at that area first. The sound of artillery bombardment rang out, covering the already bumpy ruins area in front of them into a sea of explosion and fire. Oh! The roaring sound of the engine was still resounding, and under the cover of the flying gravel and dust raised by the bombardment, two modified motorcycles rushed out of the sea of fire and continued to advance at high speed under the muzzle of the tank. On one of the motorcycles sat a young man in a black combat suit with a one-handed sword as his insignia on his back. On the other motorcycle sat a weathered middle-aged man in a jacket and jeans with a cigarette in his mouth. The two men did not seem to be risking their lives to break through the bombardment area. Instead, it was more like they were having a motorcycle race, neither giving in to the other and driving at full speed. It's really this guy Kyle who made me worry for so long in vain. Fury put down the telescope in his hand, muttered to himself, realized something, stood up, and issued an order loudly. "All soldiers in the vanguard, prepare your weapons. Wait until Major General Kyle rushes into the enemy tank defense line, and immediately launch an attack in sync." Bang! The shells, dragging a high-speed tail sound, flew straight through the air and hit the ground swiftly, crushing all the gravel within a 3-meter radius into dust, and flames and gusts of air swept across. Kyle rode the motorcycle with ease, constantly micromanaging the vehicle with quick reactions, and narrowly dodged the intensive bombardment time and time again. The impact of the bombardment was easily blocked by the venom suit on his body. Logan's eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intent. While he was driving the motorcycle, the flying shrapnel and gravel from the bombing scratched his face, but he didn't show any expression. "Are you sure that man isn't the tank unit in front?" Logan asked in a deep voice. "Of course." Kyle nodded and said, "In the past month, Sabretooth has been very cautious. He didn't show up in any small-scale battle zones where he was not sure of his presence. It was only this morning that Blue Eagle discovered him hiding in the German army here. But I'm not sure which tank he was in." Logan said coldly, "That's enough. I can smell the stench coming from him when I get close enough. Okay, I'll create chaos and defeat the tank formation's defense. And you go find him and force him out," Kyle said, twisting the handle again. The motorcycle under him soared to the highest speed, taking advantage of a small pit in front of it and rushing to the 3 meters in the air. Boom! The next moment, several shells landed on the ground, and the blast created knocked the motorcycle flying in the air. Kyle put his feet on the seat and leaped forward from the motorcycle. There was originally a distance of more than 10 meters, but Kyle quickly crossed it in a few seconds. When he landed from the air, the steel tank that was constantly firing was already in front of him. The first one. Kyle's eyes were cold. Without waiting for the tank to fire again, he stepped on the ground and jumped high. He then punched his clenched right fist directly into the empty muzzle. The shell that was being fired at the muzzle hit the fist end of the vibranium arm guard, instantly causing an explosion inside the tank. Along with the wailing of the soldiers inside and the waves of fire, the steel tank was completely turned into a pile of broken scrap metal. Kyle pulled his right arm out of the muzzle of the gun. His shoulder was slightly injured by the shell, but he quickly self-healed under the cover of the Venom suit without any damage. Self-healing factor blue ability card. On the first day of the negotiation with Logan, it was successfully drawn. The super soldier's original perfect physique does not have a significant increase in strength and speed. The most significant improvements are in physical strength, vitality, and self-healing ability. Because of this, Kyle was more confident in performing some extreme, offensive behaviors that seemed like self-harm but were actually normal. With the self-healing factor ability card as a safety insurance, your own physique can truly be called a human weapon. Kyle sped up and jumped onto the tank next to him. He pulled out his sodium carbon steel sword and cut the steel connection. He forced open the door on the top, smiled faintly at the soldiers in the tank, unfastened the safety of a high-explosive grenade prepared at his waist, and threw it inside. He quickly closed the steel round door again. A subtle explosion sound came through the steel armor of the tank, and then black smoke continued to leak out of the round door and the muzzle. The second one. Kyle stood indifferently on the damaged tank and counted. Just as he was about to attack the other tanks one by one, a hail of bullets rained down on him from the side, but they were all bounced off by the Venom suit with a clanging sound. Chapter 73. Battlefield domination. The ordinary rifle bullets fired intensively from all directions seemed to be made of rubber. They bounced off the Venom suit without any lethality. The firepower only made Kyle retreat half a step without hurting his body at all. In fact, even if there are bullets with extremely strong penetrating power that can penetrate the tough protective layer of the Venom suit, there are also high density and strong muscles inside as a super soldier. Old sniper bullets can penetrate deep into the muscles beneath the surface. But that's all. With the rapid healing of the self-healing factor, as long as 2 consecutive shots don't hit the same spot quickly, penetrating directly into the vital parts of the body, it won't pose a substantial threat to life. The 3-layer physical defense insurance allows Kyle to do whatever he wants on the battlefield. Heavy bombing strikes were too slow, and general gunfire was too weak. But a burst of gunfire from the German army stopped, and dense metal bullets fell from Kyle's Venom suit, rolling crisply from the top of the tank to the ground around it. Kyle looked up indifferently, looking down at the soldiers behind the tank. Fully covered in the Venom suit, He stood on the tank like a humanoid demon. His iron and bloody appearance, which was extremely wild and murderous, made countless German soldiers who were changing magazines around him retreat in fear. Is he a living person or an immortal monster? It's him, the devil of the American Empire. He actually showed up here. It's over, it's really over. We're all going to die here. Even though his face was hidden behind a black leather hood, his one-handed sword, black battle suit, cross-death icon, rank of Major General, and unquestionable monster-level strength clearly showed the identity of the enemy before him. American Kyle, the legendary executioner devil, was standing right in front of them. Fear seemed to be contagious. In a short moment, it spread to the hearts of every soldier in the German army. Countless German recruits holding guns fell to the ground trembling. This is the powerful suppressive power of the war hero. No matter where they come to the main battlefield, they bring with them an indescribable dominance. A brown-bearded German officer waved his arms among the soldiers and shouted encouragingly, "No matter who he is, hold your weapons tightly. Behind us is our homeland. We must." Before he finished his passionate words, a blue laser swept across a distance of dozens of meters and landed accurately on the officer's forehead. The burst of laser energy evaporated his entire head into nothingness, and the remaining headless corpse fell backwards with blood splattering. "Sorry for disturbing me," Kyle sneered and put the energy pistol in his hand back into the holster. The high-tech weapons manufactured by the Hydra organization have become rare limited editions since the energy manufacturing factory was lost. Currently, he's the only one in the U.S. military who is equipped with it and can use it as a long-range countermeasure against the enemy when appropriate. After this shot, some German recruits had a mental breakdown and fled on the spot. Although more German soldiers wanted to try to fight back again, they were also in chaos due to their own comrades, and the entire orderly troop formation was in disarray. Kyle was just about to take advantage of the chaos to deal with the tanks, but he saw a figure in a jacket quickly rushing into the group of soldiers, recklessly waving his wolf-shaped claws to kill. Every step made several soldiers wail and fall down, accompanied by blood spilling. "Logan." Kyle frowned at the figure, but soon he knew why Logan rushed into the group of German soldiers. Logan was seen madly tearing the bodies of German soldiers to make way, and advancing deeply into the enemy group in a disorderly but directed manner. When Logan rushed to the center of the army, a soldier wearing a steel helmet at the rear of the German army shrank his head, suddenly stood up, revealing his tall and burly figure. He pushed away his comrades around him with his big hands, and quickly stepped back into the German territory to escape. Saber-toothed tiger is really cunning and cautious. It turns out it has been hiding among the densely packed soldiers. Kyle shook his head with a smile. It's a pity that Logan and Saber-tooth have had new and old hatreds intertwined for so many years. Even if Saber-tooth smeared a few layers of mud on its body and hid underground, Logan could still find it with his deep impression and keen sense of smell, even if he turned over all the soil in the war zone. Now that the target has appeared, things will be easier. Kyle smiled faintly, not in a hurry to catch up with the two people who had a personal grudge. He jumped onto the top of another tank again, holding the sodium carbon steel sword in his left hand, and quickly slashed at a German soldier who stuck his head out to check the situation outside. The German soldier didn't even have time to utter a scream before his head and helmet flew high in the air. The flowing blood made the soldiers inside the tank scream in fear. Kyle was too lazy to break into the tank, so he simply threw a grenade down. The noise inside the tank soon subsided after the explosion. Da-da-da! Dense bullets continued to fire ineffectively at the Venom suit, only slightly intervening to delay Kyle's time to annihilate the tank forces. Kyle didn't even look at the soldiers outside. Under their desperate gazes, he concentrated on destroying the steel tanks that posed the greatest threat to the Allied forces one by one. The 13th. Kyle was reciting the battle statistics in a cold voice as he was destroying another tank under his feet. Suddenly, from behind him, he heard the dense and numerous footsteps of military boots. Kyle looked up and saw that in the ruined area that had been bombarded, a large number of Confederate soldiers continued to pour out from half a mile away, and they all rushed forward in response to slogans. "Charge! Break through the German border! and take down the evil Hitler in one fell swoop. Follow Major General Kyle's steps. Victory is just around the corner. For victory in the war, for Major General Kyle. Among the thousands of Confederate soldiers, Kyle spotted a familiar black officer at a glance. His bald head was particularly eye-catching in the sun, and he was waving at him. Fury, the Allied forces are really slow in coming. Kyle shook his head and commented. He had already destroyed a small part of the tank armed group. At the same time, after seeing the Allied forces launch an offensive at this time, he also knew that the German defense line would not be able to resist for another 10 minutes. This is like opening a gap in a dam. The raging flood will quickly burst the entire dam and flood the area below the river. After the most powerful tank army was annihilated, the Allied forces were able to advance basically unhindered into the German capital with overwhelming force. Germany is doomed to fail, Kyle whispered, turning around and looking at the vast German territory behind him, as if he could see the end of this major battle. Chapter 74. External Battle Suit Deployed Kill. A huge momentum resounded over the battlefield on the German border. Tens of thousands of Allied vanguard troops, with great momentum, broke through the tank fortress defense line and collided violently head-on with the already chaotic German army, immediately forming an almost one-sided shooting and slaughter. Under a continuous and dense rain of bullets, the soldiers of the German army fell in a pool of blood one after another like harvesting wheat. Soon the German troops, who had lost their tanks, retreated in defeat and began to flee into the territory. Kyle, this! Fury quickly emerged from the charging Allied soldiers, waving his hands and running towards Kyle, who was standing on the tank. Fury, I leave this to you. I have something else to do. We will meet up in the German capital in a few days. Kyle took off his venom mask, nodded to Fury, who was a few meters away, then flipped to the ground with a nimble and flexible somersault, quickened his pace, and joined the Allied forces advancing into German territory. When Fury arrived at the tank, panting, and looked around, Kyle had already disappeared among the vast crowd of soldiers. Kyle, this guy, he doesn't lead the troops all day. Where has he been? Fury sighed helplessly. But Kyle always appears at the most critical moment of the battle, and often turns the situation around in one fell swoop, which is enough. On the other hand, the appearance of Kyle and the halo effect of the war hero can bring huge amounts of psychological pressure to enemy soldiers, and also have a group encouraging effect on his own soldiers. This is the irreplaceable role of superheroes on large battlefields. Kyle ran all the way and escaped from the battlefield where the Allied forces were fighting against the German army. Following the location instructions given by the Blue Eagle in the sky, he entered the German territory and quickly approached the high mountains on one side. After a while, Kyle arrived at the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, paused, and looked around. It can be seen that the small path leading up the mountain is in a mess with trees and grass. Smooth claw marks and undried blood after the battle are everywhere, extending all the way to the top of the mountain. The faint sounds of fighting and murder coming from the mountain, accompanied by the mountain breeze, reach my ears clearly. Lone wolf, saber-toothed tiger. Kyle muttered to himself and set off towards the mountain. Soon, the scene of two men fighting to the death on the top of the mountain came into his sight. There are not many trees growing on the top of the mountain, which is hundreds of meters high, and there are cliffs on the other side. On the open space on the top of the mountain, next to the cliff, Logan and the burly man both stretched out their unique claws. The two men were like wild, humanoid beasts, using their strong bodies as weapons to fiercely collide with each other. Their sharp claws left deep and hideous wounds on each other's bodies that could be seen to the bone, but they quickly healed as before. As both have mutated beast genes and the same self-healing ability, the fight between Logan and the saber-toothed tiger is brutal and bloody. Both sides refuse to give in and fight with all their might. Unless one of them is killed or escapes, the duel will not stop. After Kyle reached the top of the mountain, Logan and Sabretooth both quickly glanced to confirm. When Logan saw Kyle, he quickly withdrew his gaze with relief. His expression remained cold without any change, and he continued to fight fiercely. When the saber-toothed tiger saw Kyle, its broad and rough face suddenly changed color, and even the attacking movements of its hands stopped, and it was almost ripped open by Logan's sharp claws. If it was Logan alone, he was still 60 to 70% sure that he could kill the other party. But if we add American Kyle, who is suspected to be on Logan's side, then there is absolutely no chance of winning. The saber-toothed tiger rolled to the ground in pain, its fierce and cold eyes keeping a vigilant look out of the corner of its eye. Sabretooth felt a little relieved when he saw Kyle, just standing 5 meters away with his hands folded, like a bystander, and had no intention of intervening. "What? Kyle, and I don't need to join forces to deal with you." Logan looked coldly at the saber-toothed tiger in front of him, his eyes filled with bloodshot and hatred, and raised his wolf-shaped claws. "I will kill you here by myself. That's what you said." Upon hearing this, the saber-toothed tiger grinned and stood up from the ground as if nothing had happened. Within just a few seconds, the claw wound on its belly had healed. He roared and lunged forward with his tall and burly figure. Logan crossed his arms to block the attack, but was still knocked flying. Like a kite with its string dropped, it tumbled on the ground several times, splashing blood before finally coming to a stop. "Do you think I used all my strength just now? I was just testing you," Sabretooth sneered, and without waiting for Logan to get up, he strode forward and continued to suppress him. "It's been so many years, and you haven't learned your lesson?" Saber-toothed tiger is the top gene in the natural ecological chain, and the superior predator of you little wolf, said the saber-toothed tiger, grabbing the collar of Logan, who had just climbed up from the ground. Logan's physique is considered strong in the eyes of a normal person, but compared with the saber-toothed tiger's nearly 2-meter-tall and sturdy physique, the difference is huge. The saber-toothed tiger lifted Logan up with one hand and formed a tiger palm with the other hand, continuously stabbing Logan's abdomen with its claws and nails. The violent attack was extremely powerful and lethal, and blood kept splashing everywhere. Logan's self-healing ability was unable to recover from the rhythm of the attack. Kyle, who was watching nearby, couldn't help but shake his head when he saw this scene, but he had already expected it. Logan is now no longer in the state of Wolverine with adamantium injected into his body. It is indeed unrealistic for him to defeat Sabretooth alone at this time. After all, although the saber-toothed tiger gene is only of rare blue quality, it just happens to suppress the lone wolf gene ability, making the beast more powerful in physique and strength, which cannot be compensated by time and skills. "Logan, you still need my help." Kyle shrugged, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. During the negotiation, Logan only proposed that he must kill the saber-toothed tiger alone and not let him join the battle. "But I didn't say I couldn't give you some help in the battle. Venom, go and help Logan." Kyle patted his battle suit lightly. Venom seemed to know what he meant. It separated into black, liquid strands from the logo on its chest, bouncing onto the ground and approaching the battle zone where Logan was. When the venom completely left his body, Kyle was wearing a casual short-sleeved shirt and pants, which was also prepared in advance. During the battle, Sabretooth held the struggling Logan with one hand. After stopping his fists with sharp claws, he threw his arm to the side and threw the severely injured Logan towards the cliff beside him. Just as Logan was about to be thrown off the cliff, a ball of black liquid bounced out, and countless black liquid strands separated out and tightly wrapped his body, forming a layer of tough black leather battlesuit. The next moment, a pair of wings automatically stretched out from his back, and Logan, wearing his battlesuit, flipped over in the air and used the gliding ability to return to the top of the mountain. Venom's suit is fully covered, and the auxiliary combat system has been activated. Kyle complained in boredom, leaning against a tree. He didn't look like someone who came to participate in a war or a fight to the death, but rather a leisurely tourist, patiently watching the exciting duel that was to follow. Chapter 75, Venom's new form in the battle on the edge of the cliff. Logan, the Venom symbiote, used his gliding ability to land lightly on the top of the mountain. He retracted the double wings on the back of his suit and stared at the saber-toothed tiger with his scarlet eyes ferociously. The appearance of the suit formed by his symbiotic integration with Venom and its full coverage is very different from Kyle's previous one. The prominent muscle contours are not as strong and perfect as before, but have more wild streamlines. Although the overall tone of the battle suit is still dark black, it has light silver beast patterns. The logo on the chest of the battle suit changed from a death cross to an exquisite wolf head. There were also 2 wolf ears on the hood. The most obvious thing is the bone claws, which turned into a dark black color like metal, reflecting a faint cold light under the sunlight. The saber-toothed tiger's face was tense and solemn. He raised his sharp claws vigilantly and confronted Logan, who was wearing the silver wolf armor, as if facing a formidable enemy. He didn't know what had just happened. He only knew that the Logan in front of him gave him a completely different feeling. Powerful, cold, wild, and ferocious, with an aggressive aura of a wild beast. In fact, even Logan himself didn't know what state he was in right now. Just now, Logan was thrown off the cliff and didn't see the venom attaching to his body at all. He just struggled and thought that he must not fall down. As a result, the back of his transformed battle suit automatically extended a pair of wings, which helped guide him to glide back to the top of the mountain. That's not all. Hatred deepens as it is dug deeper. Emotions fill the heart with excitement. Strength surges from inside and outside the body, a comprehensive increase from the venom symbiosis. I don't know what's going on, but in this state, I can win, Logan whispered, clenching his fists and stretching his black and cold claws to the extreme. He slowly raised his head and looked at the saber-toothed tiger in front of him. Outside the battle, Kyle nodded slightly and muttered to himself, "That's right. Use the power I lent you to complete the negotiated conditions." The self-healing factor that was originally intended has been successfully obtained. If Logan can fulfill his desire for revenge and submit to him, that would be the biggest additional benefit. Before Kyle could think too much, Logan had already taken the initiative to fight the saber-toothed tiger in close combat within his field of vision. A head-on collision between the black claws and the claw nails. This time it was the saber-toothed tiger that suffered the loss, as it had not expected that Logan's speed, as well as his strength and claw intensity, had increased significantly, and the sharp claws had torn a hole in its palm. "Damn it!" Sabretooth roared angrily and stretched out his arms forward, trying to trap Logan in front of him and drag the battle into a power contest that he was good at. No matter what, physique and strength are his most confident areas of expertise. There was no way Logan would let the saber-toothed tiger get its wish. He quickly lowered his body and nimbly dodged the bear hug. He passed under the opponent's burly shoulder, and his sharp claws swiftly left a few more claw marks on the saber-toothed tiger's waist, and blood splattered all over the ground like water. Sabretooth was both angry and shocked. He was angry because it was the first time he suffered consecutive losses, and he was horrified because Logan's overall strength increased significantly under the symbiosis with Venom. The speed and reaction he could have kept up with were no longer on the same level due to Logan's increased speed and agility. In the following time, Logan relied on his speed and agility to keep flying around the saber-toothed tiger like a black wolf. The saber-toothed tiger was like a human sandbag. It couldn't lock onto the black figure even after moving its eyes back and forth, let alone fight back. Sniff, sniff. Every time Logan passed by quickly, his sharp claws splashed blood on the saber-toothed tiger, and the blood spilled on the ground, dyeing the top of the mountain dark red. Even his thinking and character are like those of a wild beast. He constantly tortures the bodies of his prey, consumes their strength, destroys their spirits, and further eats away at their lives. "Ah!" The saber-toothed tiger suddenly screamed and held its left ear with a pale face. There was a smooth gap there, obviously cut directly by its sharp claws. "This is a return to my father," Logan said coldly, pinching a bloody ear in his left hand and throwing it directly off the cliff. "No!" The saber-toothed tiger's eyes were about to burst as he watched one of his ears being thrown into the cliff like garbage. He roared madly and pounced on Logan desperately. Logan jumped up 3 or 4 meters high, stepped on the forehead of the saber-toothed tiger in midair, and quickly stabbed his claws into the back of the tiger. "This is for my mother!" Bang! The saber-toothed tiger's eyes widened as it was pinned to the ground by Logan. Logan sat on his waist, and his sharp black claws scratched his back and neck all the way up. "This is for my wife," Logan growled, and blood splashed into his eyes, making them look even more scarlet and enchanting. The saber-toothed tiger, unable to stand up, dug its tiger claws deep into the stone soil, almost gnawing at the soil with its rapid breathing. Self-healing could not keep up with the injuries it suffered, and it struggled so hard that blood and gravel flew everywhere. "Logan, take it." At this moment, a young man's calm voice came from outside the battlefield, and a one-handed sword was thrown over. Logan reacted quickly and caught it. The saber-toothed tiger on the ground seemed to realize something and began to struggle violently, its eyes filled with fear and regret. "Logan, I was wrong. Give me a chance." Sabretooth actually began to beg for mercy, hoping that Logan would let him go. Logan sneered and inserted his sharp claws into the spine of the saber-toothed tiger, fixing its body on the ground. Then he slowly raised the one-handed sword in his other hand. "This is returned to my son." "No," the saber-toothed tiger roared. But the sound soon stopped. The sodium-carbon steel sword pierced directly through the back of its neck and nailed it to the ground through its throat. All hatred ends here. Seeing the saber-toothed tiger's body drooping with no vitality, Kyle, who had been watching from the sidelines, took a few steps forward. The silver wolf suit on Logan's body became agitated and transformed back into countless liquid black lines, bouncing and wrapping around Kyle's body. Logan, who lost his battle suit and returned to his original appearance, sat exhausted on the saber-toothed tiger's body, with a dazed look on his face, and lay slightly backward on the blood-stained ground. "Behave yourself," Kyle said softly. His target was not Logan, but Venom, who had transformed back into a black battlesuit. The symbiosis with Venom absorbed and replicated some of Logan's hatred, resentment, speed, and strength. Now he is still a little restless and wants to vent it on the battlefield. If Kyle was not the founder, mother, first-generation symbiote, and host of Venom, he really would not be able to suppress Venom's increased murderous nature. "Got it? Have you unlocked the new ability?" Kyle stretched out his hands thoughtfully, clenched his fists, and quickly extended 3 dark claws from each hand, flashing a cold light. "Venom suit claw form. Chapter 76 we have Kyle not bad." Kyle nodded and whispered, retracting the dark claws on his hands. In this way, the Venom suit can get rid of the embarrassing situation of having only a bulletproof outer layer, gliding, camouflage, and night concealment as auxiliary functions, but without any offensive mode. After calming down the symbiotic Venom, Kyle turned his gaze back to Logan lying on the ground and asked, "How do you feel after completing your revenge?" Logan stared at the blue sky, his chest still struggling to calm down. He panted and said, "The stone that has been weighing on my heart for so long has now been removed. I feel very comfortable and at ease. I feel like even if I die here now, it doesn't matter." The lone wolf finally no longer had to carry a heart full of hatred and resentment, searching alone around the world, walking on with wounds all over his body. Kyle smiled and said firmly, "That won't work. According to the negotiation, your conditions have been met now. From now on, whether you live or die, and how you live in the future, are all decided by me. If you die here, I will lose." "That's true." Logan smiled with relief and stood up from the ground, looking at Kyle sincerely. "Although this is just a condition for negotiation, I still want to thank you. Otherwise, I don't know how many years it will take for me to achieve this revenge." Kyle smiled and said, "If you really want to thank me, then according to the conditions and agreement, just give me your full loyalty in life." Logan nodded. Clenching my fists, I said firmly, "I will do it." "That's good." Kyle patted Logan on the shoulder and felt happy about it from the bottom of his heart. The number 1 thug of the Wajian family has officially arrived. As the saying goes, trust people when you employ them, and don't employ people you don't trust. As long as Logan dares to swear his loyalty, Kyle will be able to arrange and use him with confidence. This is his confidence and courage. As long as he keeps getting stronger, he can continue to play the role of the family leader in suppressing others. At the same time, as the family power grows in the future, with numerous subordinates performing their duties and checking each other, There will be no fear of the day when someone becomes dominant and then turns against them. After we return to the US base, I will find someone to arrange an American identity for you, and the documents will also be modified. Will you still be called Logan? Kyle thought, with his current status and connections, even if he followed normal procedures, it would not be a difficult task to arrange an American identity document for someone. However, since we are considering building a private family power in the future, we should not do too many things as a major general of the country, so as to avoid other troubles in the future. My name is Logan. As for my last name, Logan hesitated for a moment, then quickly made a decision and said, "It's up to you." It is not impossible to use the original name, but the effect of hiding one's identity will be basically lost. Moreover, today I killed the saber-toothed tiger and ended the hatred of the first half of my life. It is also time to abandon the tragic and lonely past and move towards the real future life. Kyle seemed to understand what Logan meant, nodded and said, "I understand, let's go." "Where are we going now?" Logan asked. Having killed the enemy he had been fighting with for his entire life, he now seemed relaxed and at ease, his face no longer as haggard and stern as before. German capital, it's time to put an end to the chaos of war in the European theater. Kyle shrugged, pulled the sodium carbon steel sword from the saber-toothed tiger's corpse and put it back into the holster on his back, then dived down the mountain quickly. Logan paused and took a last look at the saber-toothed tiger's corpse. Dark red blood was still oozing from the throat that had been pierced from the back of the neck. The saber-toothed tiger's eyes were still wide open on its ferocious face, as if it couldn't believe until its death that it had died so easily here. Logan shook his head slightly, then started to speed up and rush down the mountain, following Kyle, who was ahead. The two of them walked one after the other, and soon left the wilderness and mountains within the German border. Half an hour later, the carnivorous beasts on the mountain dared to show up actively, drooling between their ferocious fangs as they tentatively rushed towards the bloody corpse on the top of the mountain. Kyle brought Logan and, after joining up with his own American troops, continued to break through the German army's defenses with high morale and attacked deep into the heart of Germany with almost no hindrance. Millions of Allied troops were like an indestructible sword. Five-star General Chester was the sword holder in the rear, and Kyle was the sharpest tip of the sword, forcibly tearing apart the meaningless defense line. Countless German soldiers guarding the front line chose to give up resistance and flee when they saw the devil-like young man rushing at the forefront of the enemy army. Some German officers even saw the situation more clearly and immediately raised the white flag and surrendered after Kell led his troops into the territory. The Second World War had been fought for too long and was too painful. Although Hitler was still struggling to hold on, many German soldiers and civilians were already exhausted. At this time, coupled with the powerful attack brought by Kyle and the Allied forces, they were basically unable to stop it. Far beyond what historians of previous lives could have imagined, a similar large-scale offensive against an enemy country in the current Marvel Earth took less than a month, with hundreds of thousands of Allied vanguard troops directly attacking the German capital, Berlin. Berlin was like an empty city. The air smelled of gunpowder and blood. The city streets that were so prosperous some time ago were now silent. Major General Kyle. About 500 meters ahead is the main urban area of Berlin, Germany, which is basically the last life-saving barrier for Nazi Germany's Adolf Hitler. The Soviet communications soldier saluted respectfully and reported loudly to the young man in battle clothes sitting on the roof of the armored vehicle in the lead in fluent English. Yes, the Soviet Union, the three Allied forces, except for the United States. Only after fighting side by side with Kyle did the other Allied forces deeply understand a series of problems in the U.S. war reports that the officers of their own command headquarters had been unable to figure out after intense discussions. Why did the U.S. successfully settle the war on the European front so quickly and repeatedly win file-size scale battles with fewer troops? Why was the Hydra organization, which had unlimited energy weapons and threatened to affect Europe and the whole world, wiped out so quickly? Why is a young man in his 20s a major general and a symbol of American imperialism and power? After experiencing this Allied war, the Soviet and British military forces came to a complete realization. It turns out that there are only two types of warfare in this world: armies. One is called the army with Kelphin. The other is called the army without Kelphin. You have tanks, armor forces, high firepower blasting, and no one can move forward. We have Kyle. You have tens of thousands of armed soldiers occupying the best defensive fortress line. We have Kyle. Are you unable to defend against sneak attacks by your agent's elite team? We have Kyle. After experiencing fighting with Kyle, the other Allied officers realized that war could be fought in such a powerful way. Chapter 77. Germany's Defeat. American Kyle. War hero, youngest major general, symbol of national conquest and power. Truly worthy of the title. This was the feeling and conclusion of most of the Allied forces from other countries. And it also led to the fact that when they invaded German territory and carried out offensive operations deep into the hinterland, although the returning Kyle did not ask to take over the command of the vanguard troops, the scouts and communicators of the Allied forces still reported according to the procedure. We finally arrived in Berlin. It's a few days later than expected, Kyle said as he jumped down from the top of the assault armored vehicle and stretched his hands a little. Fury opened the door of the armored vehicle and stepped down, still with a tense face, reminding, "We have just entered the main urban area of the German capital. Behind the building bunker, a few hundred meters ahead, there should be the last armed force in Berlin stationed there. Do you want me to go over and check it out?" Logan, who was wearing an American military uniform in the car, said calmly. "No need. I'll go and take a look by myself." Kyle shrugged, and without waiting for others to respond, he left the tens of thousands of vanguard soldiers and walked towards the deserted wide street. The Blue Eagle patrols and hovers at an altitude of several thousand meters. If there are bombers or something within its air control range, it will issue an early warning immediately. With his strength and ability to save his life, Germany, which is at its wit's end, has no means of posing a threat, unless Germany, with the idea of mutual destruction, drops a nuclear bomb into the center of its own capital. This is unrealistic in any sense, not to mention that there is intelligence that when Hydra fell out with the Nazis, it stole more than half of the nuclear bomb information from the German laboratory, so that Germany has not yet developed a nuclear weapon that can affect the World War situation. The United States, on the other hand, seized the nuclear bomb information in the Hydra organization's last underground base in the Albies Mountains, and was about to develop a finished nuclear weapon on its own soil. This was also revealed to him by Howard at the base. As a top scientist in scientific strategy who cooperated with the national military, Howard was one of the core members involved in the construction of nuclear weapons. Putting aside his fear of nuclear weapons, Kyle had already left the Allied forces alone, nearly 100 meters away, and was still approaching the main urban area of Berlin. His pace was neither fast nor slow, and it didn't seem like he was conducting a reconnaissance, but more like he was strolling on the city streets. After walking another 300 meters, Kyle's supersensitivity seemed to sense something. When he was about to pass the street intersection, he quietly switched the Venom suit to full coverage mode, and his body was tense to prepare for battle at any time. Tap, tap. The moment he crossed the intersection, Kyle's steps suddenly paused, and he stood tall at the intersection of the street. Oh, oh, oh. The sounds of numerous guns being raised could be heard at the intersections on both sides, with countless rifle muzzles pointed at Kyle, who was standing at the intersection. Ambush, Kyle whispered, looking around indifferently. Surrounded by thousands of armed German soldiers with guns, he slowly grasped the carbon-sodium steel sword on his back in his left hand. Sword against spear, one against thousands. It seemed funny, but the German soldiers at this moment could hardly laugh. Even their hands holding the guns were shaking slightly, and sweat soaked the lining of their combat uniforms. God knows what kind of war demon they are facing. Don't shoot. Put them down first. In the silent, stiff, and suffocating atmosphere, a mature and hoarse voice suddenly sounded, and immediately thousands of German soldiers put down their rifles. Kyle looked over in surprise and saw a middle-aged officer wearing honorary epaulets and a general's uniform, obviously the commander of this German army, walking quickly forward from the rear of the defending troops. "Excuse me, are you Kyle from America?" the middle-aged officer asked in a slightly unstandard English accent. "It seems that there is no need for me to answer." Kyle looked at him coldly, and took a few steps forward with the sword in hand. Many German soldiers beside him subconsciously raised their guns and aimed again. "I've told you to put down your weapons." The middle-aged officer roared angrily, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and said bitterly, "Enough, everything is over." The middle-aged officer looked at Kyle, who was fully covered in battle clothes, took a deep breath and said, "My name is Friedrich Paulus, and I am a marshal of the German military. Here, on behalf of the entire army, I choose to surrender." After saying the frustrated and helpless words of surrender, the German marshal heaved a sigh of relief and continued to issue orders with a tired and decadent look on his face. "All soldiers, drop all the guns and weapons in your hands and stay where you are." As soon as the words fell, the scene fell into dead silence. Thousands of German soldiers looked at each other in bewilderment, but after one of them simply threw down his rifle. The rest of the soldiers also threw their weapons and shell casings on the ground one after another, which looked extremely spectacular for a moment. They had long lost the will to fight, and I was just the last straw that broke the camel's back. Kyle knew this and was not surprised. He put his hand behind his back and took back the sodium carbon steel sword. Whether to accept the prisoners will be decided by Commander Chester in the rear. Anyway, he had no desire to attack the soldiers who had completely lost their will to fight. Kyle ignored the German soldiers and returned directly to the Allied forces with the German marshal in charge. Germany's last resistance defense army won without a fight, which also heralded the early end of this major battle. After the Allied forces detained the German marshal and left troops to guard thousands of captured German soldiers, more vanguard troops continued to advance deeply into the main city of Berlin. An hour later, the German capital of Berlin was completely occupied by the Allied forces. The Allied vanguard troops began to arrange personnel to be stationed in Berlin, deal with prisoners, contact the rear, and other busy matters. When Fury was reacting very quickly to arrange soldiers to arrest the scientists of the Institute, he found that Kyle and Logan had disappeared again. At the same time, in the secret armory basement in the German capital, the iron door of the armory was forcibly broken open by a pair of dark claws. Two black shadows entered from the gap, fumbled to open the main circuit switch, turned on the lights, and the huge basement of the armory was suddenly brightly lit. That German marshal was not lying. Kyle retracted his claws and looked at the military warehouse in front of him where most of the supplies were still left, and smiled knowingly. "There are so many. The two of us can't take much." Logan said from the side, "You just guard the door." "I'm enough." Kyle smiled mysteriously and walked towards the supplies wrapped in green cloth. "Today, have a good time." Chapter 78. Military Treasury? National Treasury. As Germany's secret underground arsenal, its location was naturally hidden and unknown to ordinary German soldiers or even low-ranking officers. In addition to arranging post-battle matters, the Allied vanguard troops will first target the German research laboratories for weapon blueprints, high-tech products, and top elite scientists as spoils of war for several major powers. As for military warehouse supplies and the like, they will wait until the logistics personnel arrive, and then use transport aircraft to search and transport them away. This has also led to the fact that up to now, there has been no sign of soldiers searching the underground armory. This was a bargain, as Kyle was the first to learn about the location of the largest secret military arsenal from the surrendered German marshal. Having Logan on guard at the door of the armory, Kyle arrived at the large amount of supplies piled up, but had no intention of lifting the green cloth to check. There is no need for that. Within a 3-meter radius, even if the supplies are locked in iron boxes, the item card information will be displayed quickly. German rifle, Mauser 98K, Mauser pistol. These military supplies were of varying quality, both white and green, and in considerable quantity, but they were all fairly common equipment for German soldiers. In this large-scale battle that lasted for more than a month, Kyle killed soldiers and took intact spoils. There are now nearly 1,000 various German weapons stored in his card space. Green item card. It takes 1 second to draw one. Kyle didn't stop and walked straight past the piles of weapons and equipment and walked towards another pile of supplies on the side. There was no choice before, but now there is a choice, and naturally you have to draw the more valuable items first. Camouflage raincoat, sergeant field uniform, squad machine gun, After checking several piles of supplies near the main gate, Kyle was slightly disappointed to find that they were mostly white and green quality military supplies and equipment. Camouflage steel helmet. A natural colored German-made steel military-style helmet. Green item card. It's green and it's on the head. What's going on? Kyle shook his head and went deeper into the armory. This time, as he approached a pile of supplies, many item cards with the word gold appeared, which completely stunned him. Gold bars. Gold bars made in Germany. Rectangular in shape, 25 kilograms. Rare green item card. Golden bricks? Kyle's pupils contracted because not only in front of him, but also within a 3-meter radius, there was a 4-meter-high wall of supplies piled up, all of which were such item card messages. He quickly went to check and looked around the several small piles of supplies in the military warehouse. Unexpectedly, he found that they were all gold products and were very valuable. Gold ring, emerald gemstone, gold diamond chain. Many similar rare green item cards overlap and accumulate together. At a glance, it is impossible to count the specific inventory. Military treasury? This might be the German treasury. Kyle was stunned. He had never seen so much gold and gems. He was in a dream state for a moment. Now he understood that the weapons and supplies that had just been placed at the door of the secret underground military depot were basically to conceal their whereabouts. What Hitler really wanted to hide was the priceless treasure trove of materials behind the military supplies. These all belong to me. Kyle took a deep breath, suppressed his inner excitement, and began to extract the surrounding supplies one by one. Start drawing cards. If the military secretly transports fighter jets and abuses its power to move the inventory here, there will be a risk of being traced and found out. Then just take the card and take it away. Even if other countries try to investigate in the future, it will be difficult to link this matter to Kyle. Nearly 2 hours later, Kyle extracted the last golden ring into a card and put it into the card space. He continued to extract without interruption and finally stopped. The feeling of being extremely rich is really good. Kyle smacked his lips. He had previously invested 40% of the shares in Stark Industries, so he could be considered wealthy. After today, he could truly be considered wealthy enough to rival a country. Let's see who dares to say that he is richer than me. By the way, the king of Wakanda Black Panther can tread. Suddenly, the chaotic noise coming from the main gate brought Kyle back to reality in the underground armory. Kyle looked back and saw that it was Logan who quickly rushed into the armory and reminded him. There is a Soviet reconnaissance soldier approaching this side, about 60 meters away. What a quick reaction. It looks like the spoils from the lab have already been divided up. Kyle thought for a moment and said to Logan, "Let's leave before they find this place. Prepare high-explosive grenades and blow up the underground armory before leaving to clean up any traces of our presence." Okay. Logan nodded obediently. Kyle finished the arrangements and looked around at the back half of the warehouse that had been emptied by the card draw. He was about to leave when he suddenly stopped as if he remembered something. He turned around and looked at the end of the underground armory. A question arose in his mind. The German military likes to build dark basements. Could it be possible that this underground military vault, which is almost as rich as the national treasury, has no hidden layers? 5 minutes later, the Soviet reconnaissance team was groping near the main entrance of the underground armory when suddenly a strong explosion was heard. The main entrance and the surrounding stone and soil layers were destroyed and collapsed, covering the entrance to the largest armory. At the same time, inside the former underground armory, a dark room next door was lit up again by the light of day. Logan held a military-style high-brightness flashlight, shone the beam of light forward to dispel the darkness, and walked ahead to make sure the road was safe. He stretched out his wolf-like claws with his free hand and kept opening the lids of the wooden boxes that had been stored in the dark room, revealing the contents of the boxes under the light. These are. Walking behind Logan, Kyle opened his eyes wide in surprise, looking at the items stored in double-layer wooden boxes in the dark room. 12 sunflowers in a vase. One of the famous paintings created by Van Gogh himself. Blue item card. The Last Supper. One of the murals created by Leonardo da Vinci himself. Blue item card. Venus. Michelangelo's famous sculpture. Blue item card. Heart of the Ocean. This is a heart-shaped gemstone necklace made of a huge sapphire of rare purity and crafted by top craftsmen. Blue item card. It seems that these are all the world's top collections looted by Germany during World War II. Kyle sighed secretly. No wonder even gold and gems can only be piled up in the military warehouse outside. It turns out that the things inside the dark room are more valuable. Each of these collections, if put on auction in the future, will be a world-class collection that will cause a sensation and be sold at sky-high prices. Crack! Logan walked to the end of the dark room, opened the last two large boxes with his claws, and sealed the cube-shaped items inside the boxes. Suddenly, the dark room was completely illuminated with blue light. Kyle's blue eyes were bright, and he murmured to himself, "The remaining energy of the gem." Chapter 79 returned with a full load in the deepest part of the dark layer of Germany's secret underground military depot. The contents of the two wooden boxes were actually the items Kyle was most familiar with. Gemstones can, regardless of the specific effect of use, one piece is enough to be considered a blue-grade item and is the best choice for use as a sacrificial material for drawing cards. Venom, Blue Eagle, Senza Beans, Vibranium Arm Guards, etc. Blue cards that greatly enhance personal foundation are also items drawn by sacrificing the remaining energy of gems. At this moment, Kyle looked at the two large wooden boxes in front of him filled with the remaining energy of gems and sighed. This should be the earliest batch of original energy blocks produced by the Hydra organization using Tesseract to achieve further cooperation with the German Nazis. Later, after the two sides broke up and canceled their alliance, it was estimated that the Hydra organization stopped providing energy weapons to the German army, and these original energy blocks were stored together with collections from various countries by Hitler. About 50. This should be the last batch of infinite energy cubes. Kyle estimated. Tons of gold and gems, precious collectibles from all over the world, plus the remaining energy of these gems enough to draw 5 blue-grade cards. The harvest from the German underground military warehouse this time was unprecedented. These things are not convenient to transport out by means of transportation. What should we do with them? Logan asked with a frown. He had been guarding the door of the armory, but he didn't see that Kyle had already drawn cards and emptied half of the armory's supplies. Let's do it this way. Kyle shrugged, without hiding anything, and directly extracted one of the energy blocks in the box. After the 3-second card drawing time is over, one of the energy blocks disappears into the box out of thin air and is transformed into a card stored in the material card area of the card space. What is going on? Witnessing this magical scene that seemed like magic, Logan opened his eyes wide in shock. He had never seen such a supernatural phenomenon in his half-century of life. Nothing. One of my natural abilities is to store items in another space. Kyle explained as he extracted the remaining energy from the gems in the box. He had no intention of hiding the ability to extract items. After all, Logan was now one of his own, so it didn't matter much even if he exposed some of his abilities in front of him. After a few minutes, when all the remaining gems in the two boxes were drained, Kyle turned his attention directly to the many collections in the dark room, drawing all without leaving out a single one. Looking at the huge dark room that was completely emptied out quickly by Kyle's card drawing ability, Logan finally sighed. This ability is really convenient. Logan himself is a genetically mutated ability user, and he is very receptive to special abilities. However, when he recalled the sodium carbon steel sword, vibranium arm guards, blue eagle monster, and venom suit, he once again refreshed his understanding of Kyle. The person he was following now seemed to be a more remarkable person than just a war hero. It took quite a while for Kyle to finally retrieve the last piece of the famous painting. Then he and Logan left the sealed underground armory's secret room and forced their way out to return to the surface. When the two returned to the square of the Berlin Presidential Palace, where a large number of Allied vanguard troops were stationed, they happened to meet Fury, who was looking for them. "Kyle, where have you been?" Fury wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve, looked at Kyle, who appeared out of nowhere, and panted. "I asked the rear to arrange transport fighters to come as the first batch of retreating troops to return to the United States. Some injured officers and hostages are ready, but you are missing." He paused and continued. Germany has already lost completely. In a few days, officials will be called to sign the surrender. The Allied forces will not need to stay here for a long time and will leave in batches. Kyle asked curiously, "The results of this battle are pretty good, right?" Fury nodded and said, "Not bad. As the main force this time, we must occupy enough scientific talents and weapons resources. Then let's go." Kyle nodded and motioned Logan behind him to follow. The three were about to leave Berlin's main square and head towards a large open space large enough to park transport aircraft. An American communicator hurriedly emerged from the group of Allied soldiers, approached Kyle, and quickly whispered a few words in his ear. "Okay, I understand." Kyle nodded expressionlessly. After the communicator left, anger appeared on his young and handsome face. "What happened?" Fury stared at Kyle in surprise and asked. Logan also stopped silently. Kyle responded in a low voice. "Just an hour ago, two foreign agents wearing black leather jackets sneaked into the battleship in the rear, shot and killed a dozen Navy soldiers, and took away Natasha Romanoff, who was imprisoned in the interrogation room. How dare they? The Alliance war isn't over yet. Yet they let the agent attack from the rear at this critical moment." Fury couldn't help but get angry when he heard this. Before the war, it would be fine to send an agent to infiltrate the battleship and carry out a mission targeting Kyle. After this battle, they sent out other agents even more brazenly to take the prisoners away directly. Fury said in a deep voice, "Should we report this to General Chester now? Put pressure on the Soviet side." "There's no need for that. Let's just leave it at that for now. I'll slowly deal with it later." Kyle shook his head slightly, his eyes looking towards the Soviet troops stationed not far away, with a hint of a sneer on his face. "Put your evil intentions on him, and then move on to the talent he wants. This matter, from the very beginning of the Red House organization's attack, will not be the end, but just the beginning. Let's go." Kyle snorted coldly and left the main square directly with Fury and Logan. Only after they left did the Soviet officers stationed in the square collectively feel a chill that could not be stopped from overflowing from the bottom of their hearts, and inexplicably had a feeling that something was going to go wrong. The Soviet officers who participated in this operation could not help but bring the battle reports and results back to their homeland. One more thing is to convey more intelligence information about American Kyle, the war hero. American Kyle must be treated with caution. Don't make an enemy of him easily. After all, he is a man who can influence the entire large-scale war pattern and accelerate the offensive rhythm of the battle. What the Soviet officers didn't know was that a certain military agent organization in their own country had already made two profound notes in Kyle's little notebook. 10 minutes later, a U.S. transport fighter plane loaded with spoils of war took off from Berlin, Germany, flew across the ocean and landed at high altitude, and returned to the distant American continent. Chapter 80 Return in car drawing over the Atlantic Ocean. The wings of a giant transport fighter jet swept through the clouds, tearing open several white wounds in the blue sky. After more than a month of war, the officers who had participated in the vanguard troops were exhausted both physically and mentally, and soon fell asleep while sitting on the soft seats in the cabin. The scientists who were taken as important hostages all had heavy expressions on their faces and remained silent under the guard of the armed soldiers. This also resulted in the cabin of the transport fighter being so quiet that only the faint sounds of various internal equipment and external airflow could be heard. Kyle sat in a window seat with his eyes closed, his mind gradually falling into the vast card space. After this large-scale battle in which the Allied forces occupied Germany, he was probably the biggest winner. The spoils he reaped from the battlefield and underground arsenals reached an astonishing amount. In the vast card space, tens of thousands of item cards were suspended in the material card area to be processed, each emitting 3 different colors of white, green, and blue, just like the stars in the night sky of the grassland competing to shine. In fact, white item cards account for the smallest proportion, and are basically some cheap and common mass-produced equipment that Kyle draws in the early stages of the battle. Later, because green-grade weapons and equipment were scattered all over the battlefield, he was too lazy to look at white-grade items in the later stages of the battle, let alone draw them. Kyle first sorted out the cards in the material card area, and valuable items such as gold, gems, and collectibles were all transferred to the item card area for storage as a wealth foundation to support the development of future forces. More German weapons and items were left in the material card area. To him, these old equipment were useless and would be a pity to discard, so he just treated them as material card sacrifices according to past practice. Sacrifice card draw. Kyle's mind moved, and tens of thousands of green item cards selected for sacrifice immediately floated up, shattered, and disappeared one by one. And then thousands of new cards of various types were created to replace them. 1,000 consecutive draws. You sacrificed German Mauser pistol times 1023, German rifle times 2046, Mauser 98K times 59, squad machine gun times 49, reconnaissance equipment times 26, German grenade times 186. Even though they were all green item cards, it was the first time that such a large number of cards were drawn in succession, and Kyle felt a little frightened when he saw it. The extraction was successful. Congratulations on obtaining Added Life, X-34, Piranha, Golden Lion, Proficiency in Galactic Alliance Language, Military Tank, Laptop Computer, Unhatched Monster Egg. As the thousands of new cards drawn from the sacrifice appeared, emitting dense green light, a dark blue card flew out. It's not easy. After 1,000 consecutive draws, I finally got a super quality card. Kyle sighed and reached out to take the new rare blue card. Unhatched Monster Egg, a giant monster egg with genetic mutation. Blue rare creature card. The strange egg is suspected to be the result of a cross between an ancient lizard and a dinosaur. It is not yet fully hatched and needs to be placed in a warm and safe place to hatch over a long period of time. Current status. Can be materialized, cannot be summoned. What the hell is this? Kyle was a little confused. It was the first time he drew this type of creature card. Whether it is the blue eagle or ancient giant dragon turtle that can be summoned continuously, or the poisonous hornet's nest that can be summoned once drawn, it will be in the mature stage that can be summoned. There is only the initial venom symbiote, which is in the growth stage of a newborn baby when it is first drawn. This time it's even more outrageous. They just give you an egg and let you hatch it slowly over time. But the biological egg alone is of the rare blue grade. The hatched creature will probably grow up to be of the purple grade, a dinosaur monster, an alien creature. Kyle touched his chin and fell into thought. Finally, he transferred the card in his hand to the top of the biological card area and stored it. Who knows how long it will take to incubate this egg? It would be ridiculous if it took a century or two to hatch. Kyle sorted out the 1,000 new green cards again, dividing them into areas such as ability cards, creature cards, item cards, and material cards according to their attributes. His eyes then fell on the 50 blue-grade gemstone remaining energy. It turns out that relying solely on low-grade item cards for sacrifice and extraction is unreliable, as the chance of drawing a super-grade card is pitifully low. If you want to get high-grade cards, you can only sacrifice item cards of the same grade. It's up to you again this time. Kyle looked expectant as he put all of the remaining gem energy into the sacrificial materials. You sacrificed remaining gem energy X50. The extraction was successful. Congratulations on obtaining Climb, Alien Bomb, Elf Protection, Life Bonus, and Air Dash. 5 new cards appeared clearly with blue light, quietly floating above the cards.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.